Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Dru Sjodin. Dru Katrina Sjodin was born on September 26, 1981 in Minneapolis, Minnesota to Alan and Linda Sjodin. She had an older brother, Sven. When Dru was 3, her parents divorced, but they remained on good terms. Her mother later married Sid Walker, a travel agent, and they raised Dru and her brother in a comfortable home on Whitefish Lake, a scenic vacation spot in Minnesota. Throughout high school, Dru excelled academically, earning honors and developed a passion for golf and art. Her true love was art, and her room was filled with her sketches of rock stars, models, and friends. After graduating from high school, Dru attended the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks. Those who knew her described her as a lively and caring person who loved to help others. She enjoyed traveling and exploring the country, with a dream of visiting Australia. In fact, she had plans to travel there in the spring of 2004. Before the event, Dru had 2 part-time jobs to save money. She worked as a sales associate at Victoria's Secret and as a waitress at a nightclub in Grand Forks. On Saturday, November 22, 2003, Dru finished her 4 p.m. shift at Victoria's Secret in Columbia Mall. She then went shopping and bought a purse from a store. After shopping, Dru walked to her car in the parking lot and called her boyfriend, Chris Lang. During the call, Dru suddenly said, "Okay, okay," and their connection was lost. Chris didn't think much of it since their conversation wasn't important, so he didn't call her back. About 3 hours later, Chris's phone rang again. When he answered, he only heard the sound of wind and phone buttons beeping. In a later television interview, Chris recalled his thoughts when the call with Dru was interrupted. At the time, he didn't sense any urgency and didn't imagine that something terrible was happening. He thought it was just a typical cell phone disconnection. It wasn't until later that he realized the call had been cut off for a much more sinister reason. Dru didn't show up for work at a nightclub, causing her colleagues to worry. Around the same time, her friend and roommate Meg Murphy got a call from the nightclub asking about Dru's whereabouts. Meg didn't know where Dru was and started searching for her by contacting their mutual friends and the local hospital, but she didn't find any leads. By 9 p.m., with no progress, Meg contacted the police, telling them that Dru worked at Columbia Mall. The police sent an officer to the mall, but it was already closed by the time they arrived. While searching the parking lot, the officer found Dru's car. When they inspected the vehicle, they discovered it was unlocked and showed no signs of a struggle or any evidence of a crime. However, they did find a black knife sheath on the ground near the car. The car's interior showed no evidence of theft, with personal belongings including papers, a wallet, and a newly purchased purse still on the seat, indicating that robbery was unlikely to be a motive for any trouble Dru might have encountered. With Dru's friends, boyfriend, and parents unaware of her whereabouts, investigators suspected a possible kidnapping. The investigation initially focused on Chris Lang as the prime suspect, but he was quickly ruled out after it was confirmed that he had a solid alibi, having been 300 miles away in Minnesota at the time of the incident. The police obtained information from Chris about 2 phone calls he had with Dru. The first call was suddenly cut off, and the second call, which took place a few hours later, picked up background noises, including wind sounds and button pressing. The investigators went to the mall where Dru worked the next day to review the security footage. Although there were no cameras in the parking lot where Dru's car was parked, there were multiple cameras inside the mall. Upon reviewing the footage, detectives found a clip of Dru entering a store after her shift. At 4:55 p.m., she calmly purchased a purse, wearing a pink sweater and holding a jacket. After paying, she put on her jacket and left the store, calling Chris on her way out. This call was made at exactly 5 p.m. As we know, their conversation was suddenly interrupted at 5:04 p.m. after Dru said, "Okay, okay." To recreate the events surrounding Dru's disappearance, a detective conducted an experiment. He set a timer for 4 minutes, the length of the interrupted call and walked from the store where Dru bought her purse to the parking lot where her car was parked. When the timer went off, the detective had reached the parking lot near where Dru's car was found. This suggested that something must have happened to Dru while she was at her car. The investigation was hindered by the lack of surveillance cameras in the parking lot. Despite this challenge, Dru's disappearance generated widespread media attention, prompting a massive response from the public. Alongside the police, over 1,000 volunteers joined the search for Dru, and FBI officers were also involved in the investigation. Dru's last phone call was traced to Fisher, Minnesota, a 30-minute drive from her workplace. The surrounding area is rural, with vast fields. To search for clues, police used helicopters, all-terrain vehicles, horses, and dogs to scour the fields. They also asked local landowners to check their properties, but this initial search yielded no leads. As the investigation continued, the search area expanded daily. 4 days later, a boot was found under a bridge in Crookston, a small town about 30 miles from Grand Forks, where Dru vanished. Notably, a roommate remembered Dru wearing those boots on the day she disappeared. Forensic analysis later confirmed the boot belonged to Dru. In the Crookston area, further searches yielded no new leads, so the investigation turned its focus back to the Columbia Mall surveillance footage. This time, detectives scrutinized hundreds of hours of footage from various cameras, searching for signs of the abductor. They suspected that the person responsible might have been following Dru and could be visible in the footage. After hours of monitoring, the investigators identified a suspicious individual. The man was seen wandering aimlessly around the mall, not purchasing anything, and appeared more interested in observing the people around him than the products on sale. At 3:41 p.m., he sat down on a bench near the mall exit, continuing to watch people pass by. About 10 minutes later, he got up and walked away, wearing black gloves on his hands. After observing the man stand up and leave his seat, investigators made a crucial connection that he only did so when a blonde woman, pushing a grocery cart, walked by him and headed towards the parking lot. The detectives were convinced that this was not a mere coincidence, but rather the man had deliberately selected a potential target and was now following her. The police had no leads on the mysterious woman who was almost kidnapped at the mall, but Dru Sjodin was the only person who vanished that day. Given their resemblance, it's possible the kidnapper had a specific type in mind, and so Dru was the next target. Dru left the mall around 5 p.m. when it was already dark, which could have made it easier for the perpetrator to strike. The investigation focused on 3 key locations: Grand Forks, where Dru was kidnapped; Fisher, where her phone was last active; and Crookston, where one of her shoes was found. The FBI reviewed the files of all registered sex offenders in these areas, comparing their photos to the image of the suspicious man from the mall. The only individual who fit the description was Alfonso Rodriguez Jr., a man with a criminal record marked by repeated offenses against women. Alfonso Rodriguez Jr., now 50, has spent 23 years in prison. He was born in Laredo, Texas, in 1953 to migrant worker parents. He was the second of 5 children. Rodriguez described his childhood as unhappy, citing his parents' excessive criticism and unreasonableness. For 15 years, his family moved from state to state before settling in Crookston in 1963. As he grew older, Rodriguez became increasingly isolated, partly due to language barriers. As a Spanish speaker, he struggled with English, making school challenging. He dropped out in the 9th grade and began working as a laborer at the American Crystal Sugar Company plant in Crookston. Rodriguez alleged that he was molested by older women during his youth, which he believed sparked his hostility towards women. In 1974, at 21, he asked a woman for a ride home, but instead took her to a driveway in Crookston, where he attacked her, grabbing her throat and trying to force her into submission. The following month, Rodriguez targeted another woman who was sitting in a parked truck outside a movie theater in Crookston. He threatened her with a knife and instructed her to follow him to a secluded rural area where he sexually assaulted her. In 1979, Rodriguez attempted to abduct a 69-year-old high school English teacher who was walking alone at night in Crookston. When he tried to force her into his car, she resisted. Enraged, Rodriguez stabbed her in the elbow and abdomen with a knife. Despite her injuries, she managed to escape and ran to safety. The teacher, who was also an skilled artist, created a composite sketch of Rodriguez that closely resembled him. This sketch ultimately led to his arrest. Rodriguez was found guilty of attempted kidnapping and aggravated assault, and he was sentenced to 23 years in prison. He served his sentence until his release in May 2003. Notably, Rodriguez was released from prison just 6 months before Dru's disappearance, and he was registered as a high-risk sex offender, indicating that he was likely to reoffend. Alfonso Rodriguez's family expressed concerns to the Minnesota Department of Corrections that he might revert to his old ways before his prison release. But he was released since he had served his full sentence. After his release, Rodriguez moved in with his mother in Crookston, near the bridge where Dru's shoe was found, which wasn't in his favor. Detectives questioned Rodriguez, who denied any involvement in Dru's disappearance. He claimed to have visited the Columbia Mall on the day she vanished, saying he watched the movie Once Upon a Time in Mexico at the movie theater. However, investigators discovered that no Grand Forks movie theaters were showing that film on that day. After searching Rodriguez's car, the police came to a sad realization: Dru was probably no longer alive. According to Grand Forks County Sheriff Dan Hill, the search had shifted from a rescue mission to a recovery effort. In the interior of Rodriguez's car, forensic experts discovered dark red stains in several areas, which were later confirmed to be Dru's blood. The blood was found on the rear passenger window, back seat, and 2 other areas in the passenger compartment. The DNA from the blood matched Dru's DNA, which was obtained from her toothbrush. A folding knife was found in the trunk of Rodriguez's car, which matched the sheath found in the parking lot near Dru's vehicle. A receipt showed that Rodriguez had purchased the knife and sheath from a nearby hardware store. Although Dru's body was not found, the evidence was sufficient to charge Rodriguez with her disappearance 8 days later. Rodriguez was arrested and held in a Grand Forks jail. He denied any involvement in Dru's disappearance and refused to cooperate with investigators. Despite the evidence against him, he refused to provide any information about Dru's whereabouts. During a brief bond hearing, his bail was set at $5 million. The search for Dru persisted despite the suspect's silence, focusing on 3 towns. However, the search was hampered by heavy, unprecedented snowfall in the area. To aid in the search, the governors of North Dakota and Minnesota held a press conference on December 9th, pledging to deploy several hundred National Guard members and state employees. North Dakota Governor John Hoeven expressed that Dru's disappearance had affected every North Dakotan, while Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty commended the community and police for their cooperation. Despite their efforts, no results were found, and the search was eventually suspended due to deteriorating weather conditions. When spring arrived, the search resumed with renewed intensity. As the winter snow began to melt, searchers hoped to finally find Dru after 5 long months. Unfortunately, it wasn't until April 17, 2004, that her body was discovered in a field in Crookston, just a few miles from where the boot was initially found. Dru's family was devastated when they received the heartbreaking news. Her father described the moment, saying that they had been waiting for that call, and when it came, it felt like time had stopped. This was their worst fear come true, and it would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The body was found in a field that had already been searched, but the large snowdrifts had concealed it. The circumstances of the crime were immediately apparent. Dru was naked from the waist down, her hands were tied behind her back, and a rope was around her neck. There were also signs of a plastic bag having been placed over her head before the rope was tied. DNA evidence linked to Rodriguez was found on Dru's jacket. An autopsy revealed that she had been subjected to a brutal beating and stabbing before her death. The medical examiner identified 3 possible causes of death: the neck wound, suffocation, or hypothermia. Dru Sjodin's family was finally able to say goodbye to her on April 24, 2004, after months of uncertainty. A mourning ceremony in North Dakota was attended by around 1,500 people. The crime involved both North Dakota and Minnesota, which made it a federal crime since Dru was taken across state lines. This meant the prosecutor's office could pursue the death penalty for Alfonso Rodriguez Jr. Rodriguez was found guilty of Dru's murder on August 30, 2006, and the jury recommended the death sentence. Judge Ralph Erickson sentenced him to death on February 8, 2007, citing the senseless and violent nature of his crime. Notably, Rodriguez became the first person to be sentenced to death in North Dakota in almost a century. However, even after 6 years on death row, Rodriguez refused to admit his guilt. It wasn't until June 28, 2013, that he finally confessed to kidnapping and killing Dru. But the story is not over yet. Ralph Erickson, a former district judge, became a U.S. Court of Appeals judge and later reversed his own decision that had sentenced Rodriguez to death. In 2021, he ordered a new sentencing phase, emphasized that Rodriguez's guilt was clear in question, confirmed by multiple DNA tests. The issue at hand is the appropriateness of the death penalty in this case. Erickson overturned the death sentence, citing 2 key reasons. Firstly, the defense attorneys failed to thoroughly investigate Rodriguez's mental health. Secondly, forensic expert Michael McGee's testimony was misleading. McGee claimed that Rodriguez had violated Dru's sexual integrity within 24 to 36 hours of her abduction, but there was no concrete evidence to support this, such as Rodriguez's seminal fluid on Dru's body. According to Erickson, McGee's opinion was not based on facts and misled him, influencing his original verdict. Despite reversing the death sentence, Erickson noted that the circumstances of Dru's body being found naked below the waist with her hands tied behind her back suggested a sexually motivated crime, even without Rodriguez's seminal fluid being present. Judge Erickson ruled that Alfonso Rodriguez's constitutional rights were violated because his mental health was not properly examined, both in general and at the time of his crime. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Ben Rennick. In 1989, the Rennick family relocated to a charming farmhouse where Ben developed an interest in snakes. However, their happiness was short-lived. In September 1992, a gas leak caused an explosion at their home while they were away, forcing them to move into a trailer. Rennick family faced another challenge when Ben's mother, Kim, was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. Despite these difficulties, the close-knit family supported each other through thick and thin. In 2002, they moved into a new home that included a special room for Ben's snakes. Tragically, Kim lost her battle with cancer in 2009. Before her passing, she made her sons promise to preserve the farm and pass it down to their children. Ben's passion for snakes only grew stronger, and he eventually founded Rennick Reptiles, earning recognition worldwide. He began selling snakes globally, from the UK to Japan, and breeding them became his life's purpose. Ben, a dedicated and passionate breeder, put the needs of his snakes above financial gain. His reptile farm was a treasure trove of reptilian subspecies, featuring both common and rare species from around the world. The value of his python collection alone exceeded $1 million. Despite his professional success, Ben felt lonely and longed to start a family. That changed in 2010 when he met Lindley at a party. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and soon he introduced her to his brother Sam and his fiancé, Eli. As it turned out, both Eli and Lindley had sons from previous relationships, which helped them bond and become fast friends. Lindley seamlessly integrated into the Rennick family, and they began living together. As Ben's partner, Lindley assisted him on the snake breeding farm. They were deeply in love and functioned as a united family even before making their relationship official. In March 2012, Lindley gave birth to their daughter, Amelia, filling Ben with joy as he became a first-time father. However, their happiness was short-lived, as Ben's father, Frank Rennick, faced significant business troubles stemming from fraudulent stock transactions made to cover medical bills for his wife, Kim's treatment. Frank took his own life just one day before the FBI was scheduled to visit the farm. The investigation came to a halt as a result, and Frank's sons, Ben and Sam, were deeply affected by the loss of their father. After their parents' passing, the brothers put aside their grief to support each other. Ben inherited the family home and farm, while Sam received a large sum of money that was significantly more than the house was worth. Despite having their own families and children, the brothers decided to stay together in their childhood home, forming one large, close-knit family. Sam used his inheritance to repair the farm, and initially everything seemed fine. However, financial disagreements soon caused tension between the brothers. After their father's passing, Ben focused on his business and family. He married Lindley on April 14, 2014, making her a full member of the Rennick family. Ben and Lindley opened a second business, a spa called Essentia Spa Inc., which Lindley managed. However, the spa struggled financially, leading to frequent arguments between Ben and Lindley about money. Despite her best efforts, Lindley was unable to generate enough revenue to cover the spa's expenses. At the same time, Sam and his wife struggled financially. Ben granted them permission to sell some of the furniture in the house, but Lindley strongly disagreed with this decision, which caused a rift between the two families and ultimately led to an irreparable breakdown in their relationship. Ben planned to sell some rare reptiles to improve his family's finances, but the deal fell through because of a tragic event that occurred on the farm on June 8, 2017. On that day, Lindley found her husband Ben lying in a pool of blood on the floor of one of the farm's barns. She called her brother-in-law Sam for help and reported the emergency, saying she had found Ben unconscious. During the call, Lindley abruptly dropped the phone and ran outside. Sam continued talking to the emergency operator and sadly confirmed that his brother had died. Sam suspected that a snake might be responsible for the incident. The Montgomery County Sheriff's deputies were eventually called to the snake breeding facility, a place they hadn't visited in a long time. However, they were hesitant to enter the farm, fearing they would encounter over 3,000 snakes while investigating the scene where Ben's body lay in blood. Coroner Dave Colbert approached the scene with caution, aware of the possibility of a deadly viper attack. However, upon closer inspection, he found a shell casing on a shelf, indicating a far more sinister scenario. Multiple shell casings were discovered near the body, but no weapon was found. The autopsy revealed that Ben had been shot multiple times in the back and head. Despite this, none of the relatives reported hearing any shots or seeing the attacker. Sam and Lindley, Ben's relatives, were taken to the sheriff's office for questioning. During the interview, Lindley suggested that Sam might have been involved in Ben's death, citing a potential motive. Ben wanted to sell the house, but Sam was opposed. To clear his name, Sam agreed to take a lie detector test, which he passed. With no evidence to hold them, the police released Lindley and Sam. The investigation continued, exploring various theories about who might have wanted Ben Rennick dead. The police initially suspected that Ben Rennick's death might be linked to robbery, but this theory was quickly ruled out because none of the rare snakes in the house were taken and no valuables were missing. In the days following Ben's death, the police questioned Lindley, Ben's wife, and tested her hands and clothing for signs of gunpowder residue. However, the test results came back negative. After Ben's funeral, Lindley cut off all contact with her brothers-in-law, Sam and Eli, and began making moves to sell her husband's business and claim a $1 million life insurance payout. Her plan was to use the insurance money to pay off the mortgage on the Rennick family home, which she intended to sell for $740,000. When Sam and Eli found out about Lindley's quick insurance claim and her plans to sell the house, they became suspicious and notified the authorities. Sam, in particular, suspected that his brother's wife might be involved in Ben's death and shared his concerns with the investigators. As a result, Lindley was questioned again by the police, during which she revealed that she had a complicated relationship with Ben and had been secretly meeting with a man named Eric. Although Eric had an alibi, it seemed suspicious to the investigators. Lindley made some stunning confessions. Approximately 3 years into her officially recognized marriage, she admitted to having had affairs with at least 2 different men. Furthermore, text messages exchanged between the couples imply that Ben had been suspicious of his wife's infidelity, which had been causing significant tension in their relationship lately. On October 5, 2017, Lindley underwent a polygraph test conducted by the Missouri State Highway Patrol, but the results indicated deception. While the test raised suspicions, it did not provide sufficient concrete evidence to directly implicate her in Ben's murder, so she was released from custody. The investigation persisted, albeit at a slower pace. It was later discovered that Lindley had attempted to kill Ben a month before his death. She had fabricated a story about Ben being abusive and shared it with a coworker at a spa salon, gaining their sympathy and assistance. The coworker helped Lindley plot to kill Ben by making him a protein shake laced with 15 Percocet pills. Unbeknownst to Ben, he drank the shake and fell severely ill, but survived, unaware that he had been poisoned. Lindley was questioned by investigators 6 times. A major breakthrough came on January 14, 2012, when a witness from a state prison came forward claiming to have information about Ben's death. The witness, Brandon Blackwell, told investigators that Lindley had shot Ben and conspired with her ex-boyfriend. Brandon said he dated Lindley, who was married to Ben, and they had a child together about 1.5 years after Ben's death. However, by 2019, they had broken up. Brandon claimed that Lindley told him she plotted with her coworker Ashley Shaw and her ex-boyfriend Michael Humphrey to kill Ben. Lindley and Michael were arrested for Ben's murder, but they blamed each other for the crime. Michael said that on the day of the murder, Lindley asked him to pose as a buyer at the farm, and he was supposed to shoot Ben while wearing gloves. However, he couldn't bring himself to do it. According to Michael, Lindley then took the gun and shot Ben herself. The investigation into Ben's death took 3 years. On January 16, 2020, arrest warrants were issued for Lindley, Michael, and Ashley. Ashley was given immunity in exchange for her cooperation and testified against Lindley, her former boss at the spa salon. Ashley said that Lindley had complained about Ben, claiming he was abusive and belittling, and convinced her to help with a plan to kill him. Lindley feared that if she divorced Ben, he would gain custody of their children, so she plotted to kill him by poisoning him with a lethal cocktail. When questioned, Lindley and her accomplice Michael accused each other of Ben's murder. In October 2021, Michael Humphrey went on trial in Ain County. His lawyers hoped to reduce his sentence by revealing the murder weapon, which would lead to a second-degree murder charge. Although Michael had the gun, no conclusive DNA evidence was found on it to lessen his sentence. However, he made a deal with the prosecution, revealing the location of the murder weapon. In exchange, he received a life sentence for second-degree murder, without a trial, on January 3, 2021. This meant Michael Humphrey would be imprisoned for life, with the possibility of parole. The trial of Lindley Rennick started on December 6, 2021, for the shooting death of her husband Ben Rennick on June 8, 2017, at his snake breeding facility in New Florence. According to court documents, the plot to kill Ben originated at Lindley's spa salon. The probable cause statement revealed that Ben knew about Lindley's financial troubles and her fear that he might take their children away, leading her to falsely claim domestic abuse. The first attempt on Ben's life involved a protein shake laced with drugs, which was confirmed by search warrants for their Facebook accounts. These searches also showed that Ben was aware of Lindley's financial issues. In court, the events of the day Ben was killed were reconstructed through cross-examination. On that day, Michael Humphrey picked up Lindley from the spa salon, while Shaw sent deceptive text messages from Lindley's phone, hiding their true location and trying to mislead the investigation, according to court documents. Humphrey tried to kill Ben, but couldn't finish the job, so he asked Lindley to do it for him after firing some shots. In his hurry, Humphrey picked up most of the bullet casings, but missed a few. After returning to the spa, Lindley took a shower, which helped remove any gunpowder residue from her hands and clothes. Humphrey also got rid of Lindley's clothing to avoid raising suspicion. During the trial, defense attorney Catherine Barrere tried to portray Lindley as a victim of domestic violence by highlighting her personal history, family, education, and her relationship with ex-boyfriend Michael Humphrey. However, no evidence supported this claim, weakening the defense's argument. Lindley was involved with Michael Humphrey, who was part of a group that plotted to kill Ben. Lindley described their relationship as codependent, with Humphrey dealing drugs and her being addicted. She broke up with Humphrey in 2010, but reconnected with him about a month before Ben's murder. Lindley Rennick denied planning to kill her husband Ben, including the alleged attempt to poison him with a protein shake. At the time, their spa business was failing, and they were experiencing financial and marital problems. Lindley admitted to having affairs with multiple men, which she deeply regretted. When she considered divorce, she didn't know who to turn to, given her father's experience with divorce and his strong views on the matter. She reconnected with an old boyfriend, Michael Humphrey, seeking support to discuss divorce with Ben. In court, Lindley confessed to intentionally hiding Michael's involvement in Ben's death due to their troubled marriage, which included disagreements, physical and sexual abuse, and the stress of Ben's snake breeding business. She was afraid of Ben and worried about his reaction when she would bring up divorce. On June 8, 2017, Lindley brought Michael to their farm, claiming she only wanted to discuss divorce, not harm Ben. She took out the trash, then saw Michael and Ben washing their hands in the nursery. She didn't hear their conversation, focusing on how to initiate the divorce discussion. Lindley described seeing Michael draw a gun and shoot Ben, after which she screamed, ran outside, and heard more shots. Everything seemed numb, and she stared at the trees as Michael came to her and pushed her towards the car. When she returned to the snake breeding facility and saw Ben's body, reality hit her. She called Ben's brother, Sam, and they checked Ben's pulse and breathing, hoping he might still be alive. Lindley regretted not telling the police about her presence at the facility with Michael, which led to suspicion and investigation. Although there was a $1 million life insurance policy, Lindley waived her rights to the money. She received some financial compensation from a trust set up by Ben's father, which benefited Ben and their children, not herself. Lindley shared her story with her then-boyfriend Brandon Blackwell, but their relationship ended after she had his child during the trial. She expressed remorse for her continuous deception, saying she was trying to escape the truth of what happened and never wanted her husband's death. Lindley Rennick's defense team did not request a new trial or appeal her conviction. Instead, she filed a lawsuit against Blackwell, accusing him of making false statements about her role in her husband's death. During the trial, prosecutor Kevin Zellner questioned Lindley Rennick's credibility, pointing out inconsistencies in her story. He asked why she didn't check on her husband after hearing gunshots, didn't call 911, sent friendly messages to Blackwell and Humphrey after the shooting, and continued to lie as emergency responders arrived. Lindley Rennick admitted to suggesting her brother-in-law as a suspect, and Zellner portrayed her as a calculating but clumsy mastermind. He accused her of being heartless for accusing the victim's brother. On December 9, 2021, Lindley Rennick was found guilty of second-degree murder and armed criminal action. She broke down during sentencing, receiving 13 years for murder and 3 years for armed criminal action. In January, the judge sentenced her to a total of 16 years. The victim's family, including Sam Rennick, was outraged, believing Lindley and her co-conspirator deserved life imprisonment. Sam Rennick expressed his disappointment, shocked that his son's life was valued at only 13 years. He felt that Ben's death had destroyed their relationship. However, Ben Rennick's legacy lives on. The reptile community was shaken by his death and decided to honor him by naming a new snake species after him. They collected... Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nancy Paola Reyes. Nancy Paola Reyes Gorsi was born on April 13, 1991, in Granados, Guatemala, to Jorge and Pren Gorsi, a poor family of 7. Despite their financial struggles, her parents were determined to provide their 5 children with a good education, hoping they would have better lives. Nancy excelled in school, which enabled her to enroll in the University of Villanova, where she earned a degree in business administration and document management with honors. However, her academic achievements did not immediately translate to career success. She worked part-time as a cashier and later became an administrator at a supermarket, but her professional growth stagnated. During her university years, Nancy was in an unregistered marriage with a man whose identity remains private, and they had 2 daughters together. Unfortunately, the relationship ended and the couple separated. The father of the children lost interest in their well-being and failed to provide financial support. Nancy lived with her parents and daughters, working at a supermarket with no clear future prospects. The family struggled financially, barely covering essential expenses. However, Nancy's older sister's decision to immigrate to the U.S. in 2013 changed everything. Her sister found a good job, got married, and settled down, inspiring Nancy to make a similar change. Instead of the U.S., Nancy chose to relocate to sunny Spain. The problem was that Nancy didn't have enough money to buy a one-way plane ticket, let alone cover initial expenses. So she worked hard for several years, saving diligently until she finally had enough money to make her dream a reality. In July 2018, Nancy bought a ticket to Madrid, promising her parents she would stay in touch to alleviate their worries. Her plan was to find a place to live and a job upon arrival, with a few €1,000 to cover rent, food, and essentials until she could secure a steady income. When Nancy left, she was 27 years old, and her daughters, who stayed with their grandparents in Guatemala, were 7 and 5 years old. After a brief stay in Madrid, Nancy moved to Barcelona and later settled in Cadiz, the capital of the province of Cadiz, Spain. She kept in close touch with her family, calling home almost every day to check in on them and regularly sending money to support them. Over time, her remittances enabled her parents not only to support themselves and her daughters, but also to renovate their old house. Although Nancy didn't have a steady job, she made a living by doing odd jobs like cleaning houses for wealthy families and caring for the elderly and sick. Despite the challenges, Nancy never complained and was optimistic about her decision to move to Europe, where she believed she had more opportunities. She was convinced that she could never have earned as much back in Guatemala, even if she worked non-stop without days off. Nancy was pleased with her new life and even planned to bring her daughters to Spain once she had saved enough to rent a comfortable and spacious home for the whole family. Nancy initially kept her personal life private, citing her busy work schedule as the reason. However, in the spring of 2020, she confided in her parents about meeting Carlos Andres Bustamante, with whom she had begun a romantic relationship. The two had met by chance while Nancy was searching for a new place to live, and as they spent more time together, their relationship blossomed. They eventually moved in together, with Carlos being a year older than Nancy. At the start of their relationship, Carlos didn't have a steady income, relying on small, odd jobs to get by. As a result, Nancy became the primary breadwinner, covering their housing and bills, and often providing financial support for Carlos's personal expenses. Despite this, Nancy never expressed any concerns to her family, leading them to believe that she had found a loving and supportive partner. Nancy's two younger brothers had also relocated to Spain, and she remained in close contact with them, especially Dennis, the youngest, who had met Carlos and found him likable. In June 2020, Nancy and Carlos decided to move to Santander, a resort city on the Atlantic coast. When Nancy spoke with her family, she mentioned that the climate was warmer and there were more job opportunities. However, this was when problems in her relationship with Carlos started to emerge, which she tried to keep hidden. Carlos turned out to be jealous, hot-tempered, and even cruel. He had no career ambitions and was content to be supported by Nancy. Moreover, he struggled with alcohol abuse and occasionally used prohibited substances, despite repeatedly promising to quit and find a stable job. When Nancy discovered she was pregnant, she was already questioning whether to continue her life with Carlos. Carlos was overjoyed by the news and promised that their life would improve, but in reality, things only worsened. He continued to drink and use drugs, taking money from Nancy or asking his mother for it. Worse still, he began physically abusing Nancy, which she tried to conceal from everyone. On the evening of August 12th, a disturbing scene unfolded while Nancy was video chatting with her parents. Her partner, Carlos, suddenly burst into a fit of rage, yelling at Nancy and demanding to know who she was talking to. Refusing to believe her when she told him it was her mother, he snatched the phone from her hands. After verifying the truth by glancing at the screen, he carelessly tossed the device onto a chair and walked away. The very next day, a similar incident occurred. Carlos again wrestled the phone from Nancy's hands while she was speaking with her parents and daughters. He insisted on knowing who she was talking to, hurled insults at her, and even made threats. A terrified Nancy later attempted to downplay the situation to her relatives, attributing Carlos's behavior to excessive jealousy and assuring them that everything was under control. However, her concerned parents urged her to report the incidents to the police, but Nancy insisted on handling the matter herself. On August 17th, Nancy had a concerning phone conversation with her sister. She stated that if anything happened to her, Carlos would be responsible. Although her words were ominous, she didn't explain further, only asking her sister to take care of her children if needed. This was the last time her sister heard from Nancy. Nancy vanished on August 20th around 2 p.m. She sent a text to her father, promising to call later that evening, but she never did. Her family tried contacting Carlos, but he didn't respond either. The situation was alarming because the couple had recently moved to Santander, had no friends there, and Nancy's brothers were on the other side of the country. A few days later, a suspicious message came from Carlos's phone, claiming that he and Nancy had argued and decided to separate. The message stated that Nancy had left to find a new apartment, ignoring his calls, and he had no idea where she was. Nancy's brothers suggested that Carlos come to Ciudad Real to file a missing person report with them. Carlos agreed, but he never showed up, didn't file the report, and ceased communicating with the family. Nancy's relatives reached out to the police to file a report about her disappearance. In the meantime, Nancy's friends provided her brothers with the address of Sandra Bustamante, Carlos's mother. When they visited her, she became emotional and confessed that she had suspected her son might do something harmful to his partner, but she didn't provide any specific details. Sandra also claimed to have no knowledge about the whereabouts of her son and his fiancée. Although Carlos wasn't answering her calls, he sent her brief messages asking her to stop inquiring and to give him some time. Despite liking Nancy, Sandra was aware of her son's capabilities and understood his true nature. Sandra went to the police station the next day for questioning about Nancy's disappearance. She told the officers what she had already shared with Nancy's brothers: Carlos's troubling behavior and a lengthy text message from Nancy. In the message, Nancy warned Sandra not to give Carlos any money because he would waste it on alcohol and drugs, which made him aggressive and cruel. Nancy said Carlos had no intention of finding a job or overcoming his addictions, and his behavior had become increasingly threatening, making her consider leaving him. She believed it was better to end their relationship before someone got hurt. The investigation also uncovered some disturbing information about Carlos. He had been convicted of bodily harm multiple times, including brutally beating his own mother when he was 17. Although he only received probation at the time, he later served short sentences for assaulting women he lived with and had relationships with. The investigation into Carlos and Nancy's relationship revealed many red flags from the start. Carlos had a history of aggression, drug addiction, and a criminal record, which was compounded by his uncontrollable rage. Meanwhile, Nancy's friends disclosed that she was not just a housekeeper or caregiver, as she had claimed. Instead, she was providing escort services to wealthy clients in Santander, earning a substantial income. Carlos was aware of her occupation and initially accepted it, as it allowed him to avoid finding work himself. However, when Nancy became pregnant, Carlos's behavior became increasingly erratic. He grew suspicious about the child's paternity, wondering if it belonged to one of her clients. Additionally, he was consumed by jealousy, vacillating between preventing her from interacting with other men and forcing her to continue working to support them financially. Meanwhile, Carlos squandered the money he took from his mother on his own vices, leaving them struggling to make ends meet. After nearly a week of unexplained absence, Nancy and Carlos's whereabouts were unknown. Although Carlos had been in touch through messages, he never revealed his location. It wasn't until August 26th that police finally obtained a search warrant for the couple's vacant rental apartment in Santander. The discovery they made was gruesome and left no doubt that Nancy had met a tragic end. Bloodstains were found throughout the apartment, with some attempts made to clean them up, but most were still visible to the naked eye, including in the clogged bathroom and toilet drains. The police also found fragments of bones, hair, skin, and internal organs. Forensic analysis confirmed that these belonged to Nancy, even though her body was not found in the apartment. The crime scene suggested that Nancy had been brutally killed, dismembered in the bathroom, and her remains disposed of elsewhere. Carlos was quickly identified as the main suspect in the case due to evidence found in the apartment, including a package from a local hardware store with his fingerprints on it. The package was for a small hatchet, but the tool itself was not discovered. Further investigation revealed that Carlos had bought the hatchet, along with rubber gloves and large trash bags, at a nearby market on August 20th. This was confirmed by security footage from the store. An elderly vendor who sold Carlos a small cart also positively identified him from a photo. The day after the gruesome discovery in the apartment, Carlos surprisingly surrendered to a Madrid police station, attempting to shift suspicion away from himself. He claimed to be reporting Nancy missing, but was promptly arrested as the prime suspect in the heinous crime. Carlos professed his innocence, stating that he and Nancy had argued and parted ways on August 20th, after which he left town in an emotional state. Unaware of any subsequent events involving Nancy, he suggested that someone might have attacked her when she returned to gather her belongings. However, Carlos's alibi seemed dubious, especially considering the police found his fingerprints on the hatchet's packaging. Despite conducting an extensive search of nearby wastelands, sewer systems, and the coastline with the help of divers, no trace of Nancy was found. To further investigate, the police tracked Carlos's movements from August 20th to 26th, using his mobile phone signals, revealing that he had spent 3 days traveling along the coast and visiting Bilbao and Burgos before heading to Madrid. It was clear that Carlos was trying to conceal his activities, but it seemed unlikely that he would travel across the country with a dismembered body, leading authorities to continue their search in Santander. Street surveillance footage captured Carlos's movements on the evening of August 20th. He was seen walking towards a large forest park, but returned to his apartment late at night. He then left again, this time pushing a cart filled with unusual, oddly shaped bags. Since there were few cameras within the park, Carlos vanished from view once he entered the wooded area. Later, he re-emerged with the same cart, but it was now significantly lighter. He then proceeded towards the railway tracks, which were located near a steep cliff overgrown with bushes. After visiting this area, Carlos returned once more, but this time without the extra weight, providing law enforcement with a clear lead on where to search for the body. On September 16th, police discovered bags containing badly decomposed human remains in a heavily overgrown area on a hillside. The remains were identified as those of Nancy Gorsey, who had been dismembered into 20 parts using a hatchet. Although security camera footage showed everything Carlos had transported in a cart was recovered, one crucial item was still missing: the fetus of the 4-month pregnant Nancy. The state of the victim's genitals and lower abdomen revealed a brutal mutilation with a knife and hatchet, suggesting that the killer had removed the fetus and disposed of it separately from the mother's body. Despite mounting evidence, Carlos refused to admit his involvement, providing contradictory statements and trying to shift the blame onto an unknown attacker. However, traces of Nancy's blood were found on his clothes and shoes, which he had attempted to wash off but failed to completely remove. Through diligent investigation, authorities were able to reconstruct the sequence of tragic events and the entire scenario of the crime, ultimately incriminating Carlos. Forensic experts have reconstructed the events of August 20th. After an argument, the man brutally beat and strangled his pregnant partner, Nancy, in the kitchen, where bloodstains were later found on the floor and walls. Next, he moved Nancy's body to the bathroom, went shopping at a hardware store in the market, and then used a hatchet and large kitchen knife to dismember her body into 20 pieces. He placed the pieces in bags and loaded them into a cart. That night, he took the cart to a park, searching for secluded areas to dispose of the body parts. He followed a pre-planned route, scattering the bags in various locations, hoping they would never be found. The fate of the fetus removed from Nancy's body remains unknown. Carlos denied his guilt, claiming to have loved Nancy from the time of the murder until his arrest in Madrid. He used the money he stole from Nancy to fund his daily bar hopping across various cities. The investigation and search for evidence and witnesses took nearly 2 years, and the trial did not begin until July 2022. In November 2022, Carlos was found guilty of the premeditated, brutal murder of Nancy and her unborn child, as well as the dismemberment and desecration of her body. However, many considered the sentence too lenient. Carlos was sentenced to 25.5 years in prison and ordered to pay €150,000 in compensation to Nancy's parents and daughters. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Alana Frick. Alana Christine Frick was born in September 1977 in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, to Croatian immigrants, George and Anafi. She was the younger of 2 daughters, and her birth was seen as a miracle by her parents, who had been told by doctors that they would not be able to conceive again after her older sister Caroline. Alana was very close to her sister from an early age and was raised with strong values of hard work and education. Her parents worked tirelessly at a large car factory to provide for their daughters and instill in them a love of learning. Both sisters excelled in school, but Alana stood out for her determination and passion for learning, spending all her free time reading and pursuing extracurricular activities like dance, gymnastics, and track and field. During her summer breaks, Alana worked in cornfields to help her family and learned to budget wisely. She excelled in math and science, and by high school, she had set her sights on a career in medicine. She graduated as the top student and enrolled in a prestigious medical university without issue. It was during high school that Alana began dating Matthew Ryan, who was also studying medicine. Their romance lasted throughout their university days, but after graduation, Alana decided to continue her studies in Ottawa's university residency program, while Matthew settled for a job at a local hospital. Despite the distance, Alana and Matthew's relationship continued until nearly 2002, during which time they even planned to marry. However, they eventually decided to remain friends. By then, Alana was interning at one of the country's top clinics and was working towards earning a doctorate, while Matthew's career had stalled. In February 2003, Alana experienced love at first sight while working a night shift at the hospital. She walked into the staff room and noticed a new colleague, Mohammed Shamji, who instantly captured her attention. Mohammed was a year older than Alana and a resident in the neurosurgery department. Coming from an esteemed family of medical professionals, Mohammed was born and raised in Ottawa. His father, Farid Shamji, was a distinguished surgeon, and his mother, Edith, was a skilled psychiatrist. His older brother, Ali, was a seasoned medical biophysicist, and both brothers had graduated from Yale University. Mohammed later returned to Canada to earn his doctorate from the University of Western Ontario. Although Mohammed initially showed no interest in approaching Alana, she was drawn to him and attempted to catch his eye. Eventually, Mohammed asked his colleagues for her phone number, sent her a message, and their romance began to flourish. Alana thought Mohammed was shy and introverted because he rarely initiated conversations, felt uneasy on dates, and would suddenly change topics or become silent. However, it was later revealed that his distant behavior wasn't due to shyness, but rather a lack of interest, as he was already secretly dating another woman. When Alana found out about the other woman, she became determined to win Mohammed over and become his sole partner. Their relationship was tumultuous during the first year, with 3 breakups and reconnections, mainly due to Alana's persistence. Despite her parents' advice to leave Mohammed, Alana remained committed, believing she had found her true love. Alana showered Mohammed with gifts, surprises, and home-cooked meals, but he only occasionally reciprocated her efforts. Meanwhile, Mohammed seemed to simply accept her affections, reciprocating only infrequently, creating an unbalanced dynamic in their relationship. In the summer of 2004, Alana discovered she was unexpectedly pregnant, which caused anxiety for both her and her partner. Despite their surprise, Mohammed, who was raised in a traditional Muslim country, felt pressured to marry Alana before their child was born, following cultural customs. The couple had 2 wedding ceremonies in early September 2004, one that respected Mohammed's family's cultural traditions and another with friends at a trendy restaurant complex. Although they appeared happy and in love, their marriage marked the beginning of a difficult period that would ultimately end in tragedy. In January 2005, they moved into a spacious house in an upscale Ottawa neighborhood and welcomed their daughter, Yasmin Ina. However, the birth of their daughter did not improve their marriage. Mohammed prioritized his career and education, neglecting his wife and newborn daughter. Moreover, he openly expressed his disappointment at not having a son. After having her baby, Alana took maternity leave to care for her child and manage the household. However, this led to tension with her husband, who would come home from work and isolate himself in his office, hardly spending time with Alana and their daughter. As time passed, he grew increasingly anxious, irritable, and critical, often belittling Alana's appearance, refusing her cooking, and even calling her stupid and useless. Despite her struggles, Alana kept her family problems private, not even sharing them with close friends or her parents. However, one day, while talking to her mother on the phone, her husband came home in a bad mood and began insulting Alana, which her mother overheard. Her mother tried to defend her, but her son-in-law shifted the blame to Alana, claiming she was responsible for their failing marriage. Alana's mother advised her to file for divorce and leave the abusive relationship, but Alana refused, insisting that she loved her husband and could handle the situation herself. Alana remained silent about Mohammed's physical abuse because the verbal abuse had become routine for him. However, the situation escalated in the summer of 2005 when Mohammed, in a fit of rage, punched Alana in the face, breaking her nose. Alana, holding her baby, fled to friends and reported the domestic violence to the police. She also decided to divorce Mohammed and leave him for good. Surprisingly, Mohammed began pleading with Alana to return, promising to never hit her again, raise his voice, or engage in any form of abuse. He claimed he would change and make their family life perfect, controlling his emotions. While Mohammed appeared genuinely remorseful, his actions were motivated by self-interest. As a young neurosurgeon, he was about to enroll at Duke University to pursue his doctorate, and a criminal conviction would jeopardize his promising medical career. Mohammed's primary concern was his own future, but he managed to convince Alana to drop the charges and file for divorce. She even agreed to follow him to North Carolina, where he would continue his studies and earn a degree. After a period of turmoil, Mohammed and Alana's family life became more stable. Mohammed was accepted into a competitive biomed engineering program, a significant achievement. Alana, meanwhile, enrolled in a master's program at Duke University, where she received a scholarship to cover her tuition. As a result, the couple had more time for each other, and their relationship became more solid. They decided to have another child, and in August 2007, their daughter Fisa was born. Although Mohammed had hoped for a son, the family was generally happy. In the summer of 2009, the family returned to Canada, settling back into their Ottawa home. Alana quickly returned to work as a family doctor at a prestigious hospital, earning a good reputation. Mohammed juggled his work, studies, and university teaching responsibilities. Around the same time, social media was becoming popular, and the couple started a personal blog that presented an idealized image of their family life. Behind their perfect facade, Mohammed and Alana's relationship was troubled. He controlled every aspect of her life, dictating who she could see, what she wore, and even monitoring her online activities. He would openly criticize her appearance, style, and parenting, but Alana chose to remain silent and tolerant of his behavior. As time passed, Mohammed's aggression and yelling increased, always blaming Alana for their arguments and problems. In 2011, he was offered a prestigious fellowship in spinal surgery in Calgary, which he accepted. However, he moved without his family, leaving them behind in Ottawa, and they were forced to maintain a long-distance relationship for over a year. During a visit home, Mohammed left his laptop on, and Alana discovered a message on his social media from a woman, implying a romantic involvement. When Alana confronted him directly, he admitted to having an affair and didn't deny it. This revelation was a devastating blow to Alana, and she considered divorcing her husband again. Her family thought she wouldn't forgive him this time, but surprisingly, Alana gave her family another chance. Mohammed promised to end the affair and start fresh in Toronto, where he had received a prestigious job offer. Mohammed and Alana had a third child, Marius, in 2013, hoping to strengthen their family. However, Mohammed's behavior towards Alana didn't change, and he continued to focus on his medical career, becoming a respected neurosurgeon. Alana also advanced in her career, but tension between them grew. During a family ski vacation, Mohammed's abuse resumed, leaving Alana with a deep cut on her arm that required stitches. Initially, she claimed it was a skiing accident, but later confided in her friend that it was from an argument over another affair. Alana overheard a private phone call between her husband, Mohammed, and his mistress. When she confronted him about it, he physically abused her. A friend advised Alana to divorce Mohammed, but she refused. Her friend jokingly suggested that Alana have an affair to get revenge, and although they laughed, Alana might have considered it a viable option to get back at her cheating husband. The summer of 2016 was difficult. While their older kids were at camp, Alana's youngest child stayed with her parents. During this time, the couple's relationship deteriorated. In early September, they celebrated their 12th anniversary on social media, but just a week later, they discussed getting a divorce. Mohammed refused, stating he was content, while Alana felt desperate. She started an affair with a colleague who had shown interest in her. Alana found solace in this new relationship, enjoying the care, attention, and feeling loved again. She became so enthralled that she might have considered leaving her children behind to be with her lover. On November 25, 2016, a fierce argument erupted in the family when Elena told her husband Mohammed that divorce was inevitable. The next day, she consulted a divorce lawyer and then departed for a 3-day medical conference in another city. During her time away, Mohammed frantically sent her messages begging her to reconsider and salvage their marriage for the sake of their children. When Elena returned home on November 30th, she made a final phone call to her parents, attempting to reassure them that everything was okay despite her anxious tone. What her parents didn't know was that Elena had tried to contact the police that evening, but unfortunately, she misdialed the number, which would have devastating consequences. The following day, December 1st, Elena's mother Anna tried to reach her daughter but couldn't get through, so she called her son-in-law Mohammed to find out what was going on. In a calm tone, Mohammed deceived Anna, telling her that Elena had abandoned him and their children in the middle of the night to be with another man. Elena's parents were suspicious of Mohammed's story, knowing their daughter would never abandon her children. They contacted a close friend of Elena's who lived nearby, asking her to keep an eye on the Mohammed home while they rushed to Toronto to file a missing persons report with the police. Alana's family was worried when her friend said her car was still in the driveway. When her parents arrived at her house, everything seemed normal, but Mohammed was upset, insisting that Alana was with her boyfriend and that the police had been called unnecessarily. He had already told the police this when they visited earlier. Later, on December 2nd, a man walking his dog near the river, about 24 miles from the Mohammed's home, found a new-looking large suitcase under a bridge. Despite initial hesitation, his curiosity led him to open it, and he was shocked to find the body of a blonde woman inside. He immediately contacted the police, who sent the suitcase and body to the medical examiner to identify the victim and determine the cause of death. Alana's body was easily identified due to a luggage tag on her suitcase from a recent conference trip. Her parents confirmed her identity. An autopsy revealed that she had suffered multiple abrasions and bruises, but the primary cause of death was mechanical asphyxiation and a broken neck. The body was found dressed in pajamas, with no shoes, and positioned in a way that suggested she was placed in the suitcase shortly after death. Mohammed, the suspect, was apprehended the same evening at a coffee shop where he was consulting with a lawyer, apparently preparing to flee the country. However, he was caught before he could escape. He was charged with first-degree murder, but the neurosurgeon denied any involvement in the crime. A disturbing aspect of the incident came to light. Their 12-year-old daughter, Yasmin, had unknowingly witnessed her mother's murder. According to Yasmin, she heard screams and noise coming from her parents' room and rushed in. She cracked open the door to see her father kneeling behind the bed, with her mother likely lying on the floor, out of her sight. Mohammed yelled at Yasmin, telling her to leave, shut the door, and go back to bed. The next morning, he told the girls that their mother had left. Despite her young age, Yasmin sensed that something terrible had happened, but she struggled to believe that her father could have killed her mother. To protect Yasmin from having to testify in court, Mohammed confessed to the crime and recounted the events of that fateful evening. Mohammed and his wife, Alana, got into an argument about her infidelity and desire for a divorce. The situation escalated quickly, and Mohammed physically attacked Alana, knocking a phone out of her hand as she tried to call the police. He struck her multiple times in the face, pinned her to the floor, and strangled her. Their daughter walked into the room but couldn't see what was happening because of the bed. When Mohammed realized Alana was no longer breathing, he tried to resuscitate her, but it was too late. He had broken her neck during the attack. He then put her body in a large suitcase, drove around for hours, and eventually threw the suitcase off a bridge into a river, hoping the current would carry it away. However, the suitcase got stuck against the bridge's foundation in the darkness. During Mohammed's trial in 2017, his father, Farid Shamji, caused an uproar by making disparaging comments about his deceased daughter-in-law. Shamji tried to justify his son's actions, claiming Alana had been unfaithful and provoked Muhammad. These comments led to an investigation, and Shamji's medical license was revoked in April 2019. Muhammad was convicted of second-degree murder and received a life sentence, but he will be eligible for parole in 14 years. Since he had already served time during the trial, he could be released as early as 2030. As part of his sentence, Muhammad is not allowed to contact his children or Alana's parents and must pay them a substantial amount of money in compensation. He has also been banned from practicing medicine or teaching again, having his medical license revoked permanently. Alana's parents are now taking care of the children who have been left without their parents. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Maricela Botella Valadez. Maricela Botella Valadez was born in 1997 in Seattle, Washington. She was the eldest of 2 children in a family of Latin American descent. People described her as a sweet, sociable young woman who always had many friends, performed well in school, and after graduating, became a student at a prestigious university. Furthermore, Maricela was considered truly beautiful, petite, slim, with big brown eyes, luxurious hair, and a flawless figure. On Saturday, October 3, 2020, she flew to Dallas to meet up with old friends. However, by Monday morning, she planned to return. Her brother was supposed to meet her at the airport on October 5th, after which they would head to the university together. But the plane arrived without her. The search for her began when her brother realized she was not among the passengers from the flight. Concerned, he tried to call her, but her phone was turned off. He then called their parents to inform them about the situation. Since Maricela was a serious and responsible young woman, her disappearance without warning and not showing up for university classes was out of character. The family started calling her friends in Dallas, trying to find out where she might have gone and where she was last seen. It turned out that the night before, she had been partying at one of the city's most popular clubs, where she met a black man named Chuck. The pair danced, enjoyed themselves, and had alcoholic drinks, after which they disappeared together. Maricela was not seen again, and her phone went unanswered. The information seriously alarmed and frightened her parents, so they immediately decided to report her disappearance to the police. It turned out that the young woman had indeed bought tickets for a flight to Seattle, but for some reason she had not boarded the plane. No one had seen her since that night, and no one knew where she might be. The officers reviewed external surveillance camera footage, which showed she leaving with a young man whose face was unclear. The footage suggested she was walking with him voluntarily. They got into a black Audi and drove away in an unknown direction. Days passed without contact or signs of life from her. She hadn't logged into her social media accounts, and there were no transactions on her bank cards. The police needed to identify the mysterious man she was with to determine where to look for her. One of her friends mentioned that her companion might be named Chuck, but that information was insufficient. Fortunately, street camera footage helped investigators determine the direction the car traveled. The pair was also caught on camera at a supermarket, where they appeared happy and affectionate. The young woman picked out drinks and candies, and the young man paid using a card in the name of Charles Beltran. It was discovered that Beltran, a 31-year-old musician, had a criminal past, including 2 incarcerations for robbery and armed assault. He had recently been released on parole and was preparing to release his own music album. Investigators tracked down his address and found that her phone had been active at that location on the night she disappeared. When police visited the address with an FBI agent, they found the house empty, but managed to contact the owner, Lisa Dyke, by phone. She claimed Charles Beltran had been renting a room from her, but moved out 2 weeks prior, and she had no knowledge of his whereabouts. With the sole suspect unlocated, law enforcement obtained a warrant to search the house. What they found was alarming and frightening. The house was in disarray, with dirty dishes, moldy food, and trash scattered everywhere. It seemed as though the occupants had left in a hurry, taking only essentials. Notably, numerous empty bottles of cleaning and detergent products were found, with traces on the floors and carpets, indicating a thorough cleaning had taken place. In one of the upstairs rooms, a black statue of death, resembling the Mexican cult of Santa Muerte, was set up as an altar with wax candles, dried flowers, and 2 metal bowls. A thorough examination of the house revealed wiped blood stains in one of the bedrooms, the bathroom, and the hallway. The bedroom with the blood-soaked carpet belonged to Charles Beltran. It was clear that a violent crime had taken place, but the identity of the victim was unknown. The occupants had hastily cleaned up and fled, but traces of blood remained, having seeped into the carpet, under the baseboards, and onto the wallpaper and furniture. DNA experts compared the found bloodstains to Maricella's DNA, dispelling any doubts that the blood belonged to her. The house was sealed as a crime scene, and the task was to find the main suspect. However, Charles had fled, and the owner had already put the house up for sale. To learn more, the police decided to investigate the backgrounds of everyone who had recently lived in the house. Neighbors revealed that 3 people lived in the house: 57-year-old Lisa Dyke, 48-year-old Nina Morano, and 31-year-old Charles Beltran. However, the nature of their relationships and their sudden disappearance remained unclear. It was necessary to investigate each individual's background and find and interrogate them as soon as possible. The house owner, Lisa Dyke, was a commanding, ambitious, and contentious woman who had been married 3 times and received a substantial inheritance after becoming a widow. She had no financial necessity to rent a room to Charles, suggesting she had some other interest in him. Charles, or Chuck, Beltran dreamed of making it big in the music scene, but he lacked money and connections, and his criminal past hindered him. Lisa Dyke helped him by moving him into her house, setting up a small recording studio, and even sponsoring the filming of several music videos for him. She also bought him a car, paid for his entertainment, and fashionable clothes, claiming their relationship was strictly business and that she saw great potential in the talented young man. About Nina Morano, she and Lisa had been in an intimate relationship for a long time and had officially legalized their union by getting married several months ago. A close friend revealed that Lisa had an intimate relationship with Charles, which drove her insane with jealousy. Charles also had a vested interest in living with a wealthy older lover who solved all his financial problems and helped him build a music career. Charles frequently engaged in brief, casual relationships with young women, which fueled Lisa's intense jealousy. However, what role did Nina Morano play in the disappearance of Maricela, and how did she fit into Charles's love triangle? According to a close friend, Lisa's spouse, Charles, was part of this unusual love triangle with Nina, and he insisted that his young lovers sleep with both women. After their wedding, both women took Charles's last name, and the household consisted of Charles, Lisa, and Nina Beltran. The investigation into Maricela's disappearance revealed that no one had been seen at the house where her blood was found, and Lisa was only contacted once. She claimed to be in another state and then ceased responding to calls. The whereabouts of Nina and Charles, the main suspect, were also unknown. Mobile phone signals indicated that on the night of October 5th, all 4 individuals, including Maricela, were at the house. By early morning, their device signals had moved to a suburban area of Dallas, where they eventually disappeared. A few days later, Lisa responded from her second work phone, which also became unreachable. Using geolocation data from the mobile devices, the route the group took that night was traced, and the stops they made were identified. It was presumed that they might have disposed of Maricela's body in that area, defining a broad search radius. However, the search operation was slow and eventually halted due to the vast and difficult-to-navigate area. In March 2021, a local hunter stumbled upon a human skull in the woods, which was later identified as Maricella's through dental records. Although the advanced state of decomposition and animal damage made it impossible to determine the exact cause of death, characteristic marks on the bones suggested knife wounds. The authorities soon tracked down Lisa, who had moved to Florida with Nina and rented a house in Miami. However, only Nina was apprehended, while Charles went into hiding. Although he occasionally communicated with former girlfriends, he left no traces of his whereabouts. Nina, now incarcerated, refused to provide any information, claiming she knew nothing about Maricella's fate. Meanwhile, Lisa attempted to hire a good lawyer for her spouse using her connections. It emerged that Nina had put her house in South Carolina up for sale, indicating that she needed the money to continue hiding or leave the country. A month after her disappearance, authorities found and arrested Lisa, and both women were taken back to Dallas. During initial questioning, they refused to cooperate, and each was held on a $500,000 bond. They managed to post bail and were released under house arrest, wearing tracking bracelets to monitor their movements. However, they made a daring escape attempt in August of that year. Meanwhile, the police tracked Charles to Utah, where he was hiding at the home of one of his ex-girlfriends. She was raising a 5-year-old son fathered by Beltran and was thrilled to see him, not questioning his sudden return. Charles initially refused to testify or cooperate with the police, hoping his wealthy lover would use her money and connections to hire a good lawyer and help him avoid prison. However, the situation changed drastically on Christmas Eve 2012. The tracking bracelets worn by Lisa and Nina suddenly went offline due to holiday chaos, and it took until the next day for the police to arrive at their location. By then, the suspects were gone. It turned out they had been planning their escape for months and had already crossed the border into Mexico. From there, they flew to South Korea, where their trail was lost in Cambodia. The FBI joined the investigation, working with Cambodian police and immigration services to track down the fugitives. She came under law enforcement's radar after withdrawing a large sum of money from an ATM. They tried to pay in cash everywhere to avoid revealing their whereabouts, but ATM cameras helped identify them, and a neighboring building's camera captured the license plate number of the car they arrived in. This information led the police to the driver, who took them to the house rented by the extravagant foreigners. They were arrested and extradited to the U.S. in February 2022, where they were denied bail and sent directly to jail. Charles, realizing his lover was not going to save him from prison, began to cooperate with the investigation and provided information. His account of the events of that dreadful night horrified many. Charles confessed that he had been in an intimate relationship with the homeowner, Lisa, and her spouse, and that he engaged in these relationships for money and to advance his music career. He had no warm feelings towards her and often had affairs with young and attractive women, which he never hid. While Lisa sometimes became wildly jealous, Na was indifferent to his actions. On the fateful night of October 5, 2020, Charles met Maricela at a nightclub. After spending hours drinking and dancing, he invited her over, and she agreed. When they arrived at his place late at night, Na and Lisa were already asleep. Charles took Maricela to his room, where they engaged in intimate activities and later fell asleep. Charles claimed he was awakened by a noise and was disoriented, still intoxicated. When he turned on the light, he saw a horrific scene. Maricela's body had slid to the floor next to the bed, and she had bled out. Na entered the room, and they stood there for a few minutes, not trying to help the victim. When Charles regained his composure, he realized the crime might be pinned on him due to his criminal record, and his influential lovers could escape punishment. So, he agreed to help dispose of the body and cover up the crime. According to Lisa's lawyer, she had no motive to attack and kill Maricela. Lisa claimed her relationship with Charles was strictly business, and she viewed his promising music career as a good investment. She wasn't concerned about who he slept with or flirted with. However, Lisa did say that Charles was hot-tempered and cruel, especially when drunk. She claimed that on the night of the murder, Charles brought a new girl from the club, and an argument erupted. Charles grabbed a knife, and despite Lisa and Na's attempts to intervene, Maricela was killed. They helped dispose of the body and clean up the scene under the threat of becoming Charles's next victims. Lisa's friend testified that Lisa was obsessed with Charles and had repeatedly confessed to wanting to eliminate any girl who got close to him. The friend also mentioned an odd statue of Santa Muerte at Lisa's house, which Lisa claimed was for black magic to ensure Charles' devotion to her. However, it seemed the ritual failed, and Lisa resorted to using a knife. Another witness, a real estate agent, testified that Lisa and Na were eager to sell several properties they owned as quickly as possible, including their Dallas home, which was the site of the alleged crime. The court took into account Charles's full confession and cooperation with the investigation. Lisa Dyke Beltran was found guilty of the brutal crime against Maricela, concealing evidence, and attempting to flee. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Charles Beltran and Nina Morin fully admitted their guilt and agreed to cooperate with the investigation. They were found guilty of concealing evidence, and Nina was sentenced to 7 years in prison, with the possibility of release in 3 years due to good behavior. Charles, previously convicted on multiple occasions, was sentenced to 12 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving. To our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nicole Lenway. Nicole Lenway, also known as Nikki Lenford, was born on July 11, 1989, in a small town in Minnesota. There is little information available about her parents and early life. According to some reports, her father left the family when she was young, and her mother raised her alone, providing her with a good education. Nikki was an exceptional student and athlete, excelling in track and field and martial arts. She decided to dedicate her life to fighting crime and served in law enforcement. After graduating with honors from the police academy, she moved to Minneapolis and joined the criminal investigation department as an assistant investigator. Colleagues described Nikki as a determined, goal-oriented woman and a fearless officer, ready to take risks. However, in her personal life, she became a pawn in the hands of a sophisticated manipulator. In 2012, at a martial arts competition, 23-year-old Nicole met Timothy "Tim" Ama, a coach and martial arts master who was 8 years her senior. Timothy, a gentleman man, won Nikki's heart with his charming nature and kind gestures. He demonstrated his reliability and care, making Nikki fall deeply in love with him. They started a romantic relationship and moved in together. Initially, everything was wonderful, and Nikki felt happy and loved. However, Timothy's behavior began to change gradually. He revealed his true nature, but subtly enough that Nikki wasn't alarmed at first. Behind his charming facade, Timothy was a sophisticated tormentor who enjoyed flirting with other women, even in Nikki's presence. This behavior hurt and humiliated Nikki, making her feel insecure. Nikki had hoped that Timothy would eventually settle down and become more restrained, but months passed and his behavior didn't change. He continued to flirt and engage in affairs, assuring Nikki that he loved only her. When Nikki confronted him, he would snap at her, saying she had no right to tell him what to do. He would later apologize, telling Nikki that no one would ever love her as much as he did, and she would forgive him. The situation escalated in the fall of 2014 when Timothy flew into a rage during a minor argument, grabbing Nikki by the throat and choking her until she almost lost consciousness. He then pushed her into a wall, making her realize that she was in an unhealthy relationship. However, her emotional attachment to Timothy was too strong, and she forgave him once again. Timothy's behavior towards Nikki was extremely controlling and jealous. He would constantly monitor her movements, check her phone and social media without her permission, and accuse her of infidelity without any evidence. Despite his own infidelity, he would manipulate Nikki into believing that no one would ever love her as much as he did, trapping her in the relationship. In November 2015, after a violent argument, Nikki gathered her belongings and left the house. Timothy, who didn't believe she would actually leave, chased her down, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her back inside. However, Nikki's screams and struggles attracted the attention of their neighbors, forcing Timothy to back down. Finally, free from the abusive relationship, Nikki felt a sense of relief. But Timothy didn't give up. He shifted his tactics from threats and blackmail to romantic gestures, sending flowers and messages filled with tenderness, pleading for another chance. For a month, Nikki stood firm, refusing to return to him. However, her plans were disrupted when she discovered she was pregnant in December 2015. Nikki knew that if Timothy found out, he would use it to manipulate her into getting back together. She tried to keep her pregnancy a secret, but their mutual friends and acquaintances soon informed Timothy, who urged her to return to him, arguing that their child should grow up in a complete family. Nikki, who grew up without a father, understood the challenges of single parenthood, but she also recognized that being with a manipulative and cruel person like Timothy would be detrimental to her and the child. Despite still having feelings for him, she refused to reunite with her ex-boyfriend, but she did agree to let him participate in their child's life as a nominal father. Nicole gave birth to a healthy boy named Callahan Ammer on June 20, 2016. The father, Tim, acknowledged paternity and initially expressed a desire to raise the child with Nicole. However, it soon became clear that Tim was not interested in being a good father and only wanted to use the child as a tool to manipulate Nicole. Nicole took almost a year of maternity leave to care for her son, devoting herself entirely to motherhood. Meanwhile, Tim continued his carefree life with multiple lovers and casual connections. He even had a system in place where he would signal to his lovers when he was available by turning on a purple light in his bedroom. In 2016, Tim started living with his 18-year-old protege, Colin, who had been deeply in love with him since she was 14. Despite the significant age difference, the couple hid their relationship from outsiders, claiming Colin was just renting a room in Tim's house. By the summer of 2017, Nicole was forced to return to work as a forensic expert at the main police headquarters in Minneapolis. With her unpredictable work schedule, she would often ask Tim to look after their son, mainly because she believed it was beneficial for the boy to spend time with his father and to save on nanny costs. However, Tim would always shift the responsibility onto Colin, who developed a fondness for the little boy and enjoyed taking care of him. Tim would tell Colin that Nicole was a bad mother who didn't want to care for her child and was looking for excuses to offload her son onto them. In the spring of 2017, Nicole started a new romantic relationship with a fellow police officer named Donovan Ford, who treated her with tenderness and care and expressed a desire to adopt Callahan. However, when Tim found out about their relationship, he became enraged and decided to use their son and the naive Colin to destroy Nicole's new relationship. Tim would regularly report to social services that Donovan was abusing Callahan and that Nicole was doing nothing to stop it, resulting in frequent visits from Child Protective Services. For years, Nicole and her new partner were subjected to harassment and intimidation by her ex-boyfriend, Timothy, who falsely accused them of domestic violence. Timothy convinced Colin, a friend, that Nicole and her partner were a danger to their son, Callahan, and that they might harm him. Timothy continued to psychologically manipulate Colin, convincing him that Callahan was in danger and that Nicole and her partner were cruel to him. Meanwhile, Timothy harassed and threatened Nicole and her partner, even filing false police reports against them. Donovan tried to have a calm and rational conversation with Timothy, but it didn't work. Timothy continued to terrorize Nicole and her partner, making their lives a living hell. He eventually took the matter to court, claiming he wanted sole custody of their son. Nicole was terrified, knowing Timothy's ability to lie and manipulate. She understood that he didn't actually care about their son's well-being, He just wanted to punish her for moving on with her life. Meanwhile, Nicole decided to seek a restraining order against Timothy, citing his erratic behavior and the threat he posed to her and her family. She was confident that she would gain custody of their son, but she knew the legal battles could drag on for years. During this time, Timothy continued to concoct fabricated stories, including a false accusation that Nicole had tried to run him over with her car. However, he couldn't provide any evidence to support his claim. In September 2022, the custody case went to court, with Timothy accusing Nicole of harming their son. However, the court saw through his lies and awarded sole custody to Nicole. Despite this, Timothy persisted and appealed the decision. He was eventually allowed to see his son at a specialized family center designed to minimize conflict between parents. However, on April 19, 2022, when Nicole arrived at the family center to pick up her son, a mysterious attacker dressed in black clothing and a mask approached her, shot her 4 times at close range, and quickly disappeared. Incredibly, Nicole remained conscious and managed to call emergency services despite being severely injured. A woman happened to be driving by when she heard shots fired and saw a black figure jump into a vehicle and speed away. She immediately pulled over to ensure the shooter was gone, then rushed to help the victim, Nicole. The woman explained what had happened to the dispatcher, provided the address, and pressed her clothing against Nicole's wounds to stop the bleeding, ultimately saving her life. Nicole spent several days in a coma, teetering on the brink of life and death. She lost a lot of blood and her vital organs were affected, but doctors managed to stabilize her condition. Medical professionals believed Nicole was incredibly lucky, as death was only millimeters away from 2 bullets. One passed near an artery and the other nearly struck her heart. When Nicole regained consciousness, she reported to the police that her ex-lover, Timothy, was the one who had shot her. The police interrogated Timothy, who had a solid alibi since he was at the family center with his son at the time of the attack, as confirmed by staff and internal surveillance footage. The investigation also explored the possibility that someone among the criminals Nicole had previously arrested might have organized the attack. 4 casings were found at the scene, and a camera at the nearest intersection captured a suspicious black Dodge Ram pickup running a red light without license plates. An eyewitness reported seeing the same vehicle, which led the police to check what vehicles Timothy owned. During another interrogation, Timothy mentioned owning a Chevrolet Traverse SUV and a Dodge Challenger, but not a pickup. However, the investigation revealed that Timothy was lying, and a black Dodge Ram, identical to the one used by the shooter, was registered in his name. When shown the surveillance footage, Timothy admitted to owning the pickup, but claimed he rarely used it. The vehicle was equipped with colorful stickers, which were verified, but appeared to have been applied recently. While all the evidence was circumstantial, the police needed to find the weapon and the actual shooter to fully resolve the case. It was discovered that Timothy's vehicle had a satellite navigation system, allowing the tracing of the vehicle's entire route. The system revealed that the car was brought to the back entrance of a Tando school on the evening of April 18th, where it remained all night and almost the entire next day. Road cameras traced the vehicle's route, showing it arrived with license plates. The evening after the incident, the car used in the crime was found, but without the perpetrators. The person who drove the car that day was short and slender, with a feminine silhouette from a distance. As a result, the police decided to detain and question Amma's live-in girlfriend, Colin Larson. A search of their home was also conducted, and although the weapon used in the crime was not found, the police discovered ammunition of the same caliber. Colin, who was frightened, soon began to give confessional testimony, confirming that Timothy was the mastermind behind the crime. However, Colin believed that Timothy had acted with good intentions, thinking they were trying to save little Callahan from a cruel mother. Timothy had spent years manipulating Colin, convincing her that the boy was being mistreated and subjected to violence, and she unquestioningly believed every word. She felt sorry for the child and believed that Timothy wanted to protect him. The trial of the conspirators began in November of the same year. Colin confessed that Timothy had provided her with the firearm and had taken it back after the assassination attempt, but she didn't know what he did with it. The prosecution was largely built on circumstantial evidence, but Colin's confession was the decisive factor. The court also considered the testimony of the victim, Nicole, about Timothy's manipulative nature and his ability to deceive the women who loved him. Timothy Ama was found guilty of organizing a first-degree attempted murder, as well as incitement and aiding and abetting, and was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Colin Larson received 16 years in prison as the executive. A year after the assassination attempt, Nicole fully recovered physically and emotionally. She and Donovan officially legalized their relationship, and he became a loving father to Callahan. The now married Ford couple is expecting their first child together, and the woman who saved Nicole's life will be the child's godmother. It should be added that Timothy will be eligible for parole in 2035, but he will be prohibited from coming within 100 meters of his son, former lover, and her family members, and from attempting any form of contact with them. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nathan and Crystal Maddox. Nathan and Crystal Maddox grew up on neighboring streets, fell in love, and later got married when Crystal became pregnant. Despite initial disapproval from Crystal's parents, they eventually accepted the relationship and even let the young couple get married. After their wedding, Nathan and Crystal started a family, having a daughter named Madison. However, their life was far from perfect. Nathan had to work hard to support his family, often traveling to Montana for work. Despite the distance, he remained devoted to his family, regularly sending money and visiting whenever possible. But one day, Nathan returned home from Montana to find his house empty and a note from Crystal saying she was leaving him. She claimed she didn't know where he was or when he would return, which was a lie, as Nathan had been regularly updating her on his whereabouts. The worst part was that she took their daughter Madison with her and even went to the police station, falsely accusing Nathan of neglecting his child in order to gain full custody. Nathan tried to visit his daughter Madison, but her mother's family, the Westfalls, kept pushing him away, relieved to be rid of him. Years passed, and Nathan returned to his hometown to be close to Madison. He didn't give up trying to see her, but he knew he needed a lawyer to get official custody and legal visitation rights. During this time, Nathan met Crystal, an old friend from childhood. They had gone to school together, but their paths diverged when Crystal moved to the city to attend university. However, she got married and started a family instead of pursuing a career. After her divorce, Crystal returned to her hometown with her 4 children. Nathan was immediately drawn to Crystal's energy and optimism. They got married in 2013, and Nathan worked at a warehouse while Crystal started a clothing business and opened a children's boutique. The family was doing well, and they could finally afford a good lawyer to help Nathan get custody of Madison. Madison was thrilled with her father's new family, including Crystal and her siblings. This made Kristen's parents, Lita and Paula Westfall, very resentful and afraid of losing their granddaughter. In 2012, Kristen had applied for full custody of Madison, and the battle dragged on for 2 years. However, Crystal's presence in Nathan's life changed everything. With a stable family and a good job, Nathan was granted visitation rights, and he was ecstatic. In October 2013, the judge allowed supervised visits with Madison. On January 18, 2014, Nathan and Crystal attended a Sunday service at Mount Carmel Church, planning to take Madison for a walk afterwards. But as they left the church, 3 loud shots were heard. Nathan and Crystal were shot and killed, shocking the small town. The police investigation revealed that Nathan and Crystal were shot in the head with a .30 caliber rifle, and Nathan was also shot in the thigh with a 20-gauge shotgun, indicating that there were two shooters. The investigation continued, with interviews of witnesses, acquaintances, and relatives, including Kristen's family. The Westfall's behavior shocked investigators. Instead of grieving Nathan's death, they seemed to be hiding their joy. Paul Westfall even faked a seizure, claiming he was too shocked to believe the news. It was clear they were involved in the murder, but the motive remained unknown. Kristen was the first to be interviewed, and her demeanor was eerily calm, and that despite her long history with Nathan and their shared child. She provided strange details about him, only highlighting the negative aspects of their relationship. Kristen claimed she knew who killed him, mentioning that Nathan had been involved with dangerous motorcycle gangs in Montana. One gang member had even threatened to kill him at his mother's house. Although this story checked out, it turned out to be an empty threat due to a broken motorcycle. As an alibi, Kristen said she was at the grocery store with her father, Paul, on the day of the crime. Surveillance footage confirmed their presence at 10:57 a.m. Paul told the same story, but as a hunter with access to firearms, his hands were tested for gunpowder residue, which came back negative. However, his reaction to Nathan's death seemed suspicious, leaving a sliver of doubt about his sincerity. Further investigation revealed that Nathan was involved in a bitter custody battle with Kristen over their daughter. He was close to gaining custody, which the Westfall family strongly opposed. This desperate battle might have been a motive for the murder, but the police had no concrete evidence to arrest anyone. The family consisted of 4 people, and 2 of them were the shooters. Investigators were yet to figure out who pulled the trigger or if they had hired a killer. Focusing on the key player in the controversy, Madison Maddox, the police decided to act. They removed her from the home, citing safety concerns, and searched the house. The search yielded disturbing results. A gun was easily accessible, and illegal drugs were scattered around the house. In 2013, Kristen was arrested and charged with possessing a controlled substance. Despite this, she continued to live with her parents and daughter, defying court orders. In 2014, Child Protective Services discovered a used syringe with illegal substances and a gun on Kristen's nightstand, leading to Madison being taken into temporary custody. The authorities wanted to place Madison in foster care due to the presence of illegal substances and a gun in the Westfall home. However, there was no direct evidence linking the Westfalls to the Maddox murder, and cross-examinations did not produce the desired results. To pressure the Westfalls, the police focused on 18-year-old Cameron, the most vulnerable family member. They threatened him with life imprisonment for his family and the death penalty for the direct killers if he didn't cooperate. Fearing for his family, Cameron agreed to work with the investigation and revealed the details of the crime. The murder of the young couple, Maddox, was carefully planned by the Westfall family to eliminate Nathan from his role as father. This was due to a bitter custody dispute between Nathan and his ex-wife, Kristen, who had the support of her family. The Westfalls were determined to keep Madison from her father, and when the judge allowed Nathan multiple visitations, it became clear he could win the trial. Kristen and her family plotted a scheme to remove Nathan from Madison's life. They tried to find someone to kill him, but when that failed, Kristen and her father decided to do it themselves. On January 18th, the family attended church, and Kristen and Paul created an alibi by posing as customers at a distant store to get on CCTV cameras. Meanwhile, Lita Westfall, Kristen's mother, attended the church service with Madison and informed Paul of Nathan and Crystal's departure. She called 911 immediately after the murder. Cameron played a role in concealing the evidence, discarding the gun used in the murder near a remote church and at a lake. He later cooperated with authorities, revealing that Kristen came up with the idea and the family went along with it. The police arrested Kristen, her brother Cameron, and her parents, Paul and Lita Westfall, and charged them with organized crime. Kristen and Paul were the ones who pulled the trigger. while Cameron and Lita acted as willing accomplices. Although Lita was at the church during the incident, phone records showed she informed her daughter and husband of the couple's whereabouts. The trial was lengthy, with each member of the Westphal family tried separately. Paul Westphal was initially found mentally unfit, but was later deemed competent and faced the death penalty along with Lita. To avoid the death penalty, they agreed to a plea bargain with the DA's office. Paul Westphal took a plea bargain with the prosecution, pleading guilty to the charges and receiving a life sentence without parole. Lita Westphal, his wife, also took a plea bargain, pleading guilty to organized criminal activity. She will be eligible for parole in 2046 and is currently incarcerated at Mountain View Prison in Gatesville, Texas. Kristen Westphal, the daughter of Paul and Lita, pleaded not guilty to all charges against her, claiming her family was crazy and she was the only sane one. However, when her family members testified against her in court, she was unable to respond. The motive behind the murder of Nathan and Crystal Maddox was revealed to be custody of their 5-year-old daughter, Madison. Kristen did not want Nathan to have unrestricted access to Madison and wanted to control her father's communication with the child. The trial took over a week, and with overwhelming evidence against her, the jury found her guilty of capital murder in just 8 hours. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Cameron Westphal, the youngest member of the family, was charged with 2 counts of tampering with evidence. He pleaded guilty and received a deferred sentence, contingent upon him testifying against his family. He faced up to 10 years in prison on each charge. Although he claimed to have had no involvement in the actual shooting, phone records showed that his mother had texted her husband and daughter during the crime. Cameron is currently incarcerated at the Huntsville Correctional Facility in Texas and is expected to be released in 2025. The case was highly publicized and shook the community of Colmsnale, Texas, to its core. The Westphal family's brutal crime was committed outside Mount Carmel Baptist Church, where Nathan and Crystal Maddox were shot and killed in 2014. In 2016, a judge sentenced Cameron to 10 years in prison, and his mother received a life sentence the following year. Lloyd Paul was also sentenced to life in prison after pleading guilty to first-degree murder, which meant he could not appeal his sentence. Kristen Westphal, the mastermind behind the crime, received a life sentence without parole. The legal battle for custody of Madison Maddox, Kristen's daughter, continued even after the Westphal family was sentenced. Nathan Maddox's father, Jim, filed a petition to become the primary guardian of his granddaughter. It's worth noting that many people die in custody battles every year, and instead of making children happier, these battles often leave them with psychological problems. The Westphal family, who were devout churchgoers, were willing to kill to achieve their goals, hiding behind their concern for Madison. Nathan, Madison's father, was not a bad person and loved his daughter. However, his ex-wife Kristen was filled with hatred towards him, particularly because he had started a new family and found happiness with his new partner, Crystal. Kristen was able to manipulate her family against Nathan, leading to the tragic events that unfolded. The custody dispute started before Nathan and Crystal's relationship, and in the end, there is only one loser: Madison. Hopefully, when she grows up, she will not remember the selfishness of the adults who used her for their own gain, claiming to act out of love. If they truly loved her, they would have worked to build a normal relationship for her sake, rather than pursuing their own interests. Welcome to our channel today. We're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Luz Maria Lopez. Luz Maria Lopez was born on March 17, 1995, in San Cristobal Verapaz, a small town, to a modest family of A. Morales and Brian Lopez. She was the youngest of 2 children, with an older brother named Omar. In infancy, Luz Maria faced a life-threatening intestinal obstruction that required a complex operation. Despite the doctor's uncertainty, her mother's prayers and faith in her recovery paid off, and the surgery was successful. Fortunately, The early surgery did not affect her development. During her school years, Luz Maria was an active and well-rounded student. She participated in gymnastics, athletics, and classical dance, and was a people person who easily made friends. She also excelled academically, particularly in the humanities. After graduation, Luz Maria decided to pursue higher education at a prestigious state university, where she chose to study law and later specialized in criminalistics, a field that had always fascinated her. When Luz Maria was a student, she accompanied her mother to a car dealership in Coban, the capital of Alta Verapaz, to buy a motorcycle as a 25th birthday gift for her older brother. They met a polite and attentive young consultant named Jorge, who showed them various models and offered recommendations. Although Luz Maria and her mother chose a model, they decided to think it over and consult with the rest of the family before making a decision. Before leaving, Luz Maria gave Jorge her phone number in case they needed further feedback. Shortly after, Jorge called Luz Maria, but instead of discussing the potential purchase, their conversation turned personal. Luz. He continued to call her several times before mustering the courage to invite her to a coffee shop. It was clear that he was smitten with the beautiful brunette, but didn't know how to initiate their acquaintance. Luz Maria was immediately drawn to a handsome young man, and when he asked to meet, she agreed. The only potential obstacle was that he was a year younger, but that didn't deter them. A romantic relationship quickly blossomed, and they both felt an intense connection, believing they had found true love. After just a few months, they decided to take the next step and start living together. Despite their parents' disapproval, they pressed on and got married 6 months later. They kept the wedding intimate, inviting only close friends and family. However, the celebration was almost ruined on the wedding day when the banquet venue encountered an unexpected issue. The couple had to pay a significant amount of extra money to salvage the event, but they were eventually able to go ahead with the ceremony as planned. Jorge is a mysterious figure, and there is limited information available about him in the public domain. What is known is that he was born in 1996 in the town of Santa Catalina Latina, Guatemala. Jorge grew up with his brother Pablo in a low-income family, where financial struggles were a constant reality. As a result, the brothers had to make do with the basics and didn't have the luxury of nice clothes or expensive toys. Contrary to what one might expect, Jorge didn't have big aspirations or ambitions. He never made an effort to study or find a good job, and instead, he took things as they came. Those who knew Jorge described him as introverted, uncommunicative, and sometimes aggressive. He struggled with controlling his emotions, which made it difficult for him to form meaningful relationships or connect with the opposite sex. Despite these challenges, Jorge was determined to win the heart of Luz Maria, the love of his life. He went all out to impress her, and once she agreed to marry him, he was in a hurry to seal the deal, fearing she might change her mind. Luz Maria's parents, however, were not convinced about Jorge from the start. They had reservations about their son-in-law, although they couldn't quite put their finger on what bothered them. Despite their misgivings, they couldn't persuade their daughter to reconsider her decision to marry Jorge. After the wedding, the young couple's marriage quickly became unhappy. The wife, Luz Maria, got pregnant, but she couldn't find a good job because she didn't have a university degree and was inexperienced. No employer wanted to hire an expectant mother with no skills, so she had to settle for casual labor. Meanwhile, her husband, Jorge, lost his job and showed no enthusiasm for finding a new one. When their daughter, Alice, was born, the family's financial situation became dire. Both Jorge and Luz Maria were unemployed and struggling to make ends meet. They couldn't even afford to pay rent, buy food, or purchase basic household necessities. Jorge convinced Luz Maria that they had no choice but to move in with his parents temporarily. Luz Maria was initially hesitant, but with a baby to care for and no other options, she eventually agreed. Her mother, was aware of the family's problems and encouraged Luz Maria to return to her childhood home, But Luz Maria insisted that things would improve with Jorge, and there was no need to worry. Luz Maria's mother visited her daughter and granddaughter at her son-in-law's parents' house, but was met with a disturbing scene. Luz Maria was in a terrible condition, malnourished from only eating once a day. This was partly due to her in-laws not providing her with sufficient food, as they saw her as unemployed. The situation was even more concerning because Luz Maria was breastfeeding her baby, Alice, so her malnutrition could also harm the child's health. The lack of food was just one of the many problems Luz Maria faced in her in-laws' home. She was constantly humiliated and even physically abused by her husband's younger brother. He was irritated by the baby's crying and the presence of children's belongings in the house. He would lash out at Luz Maria, throwing her child's things at her, and on one occasion, even threw a baby bottle at her, hitting Alice, who was in her mother's arms. Jorge refused to stand up for his wife and daughter, treating them as if they were strangers. His mother-in-law, AA, convinced her daughter to take her granddaughter and move back to her parents' house. However, Jorge soon showed up, asking his wife to return and promising to get a job. She agreed, but only if their children could rent an apartment and live separately from his parents. After Luz Maria defended her diploma, she achieved her long-held dream. She landed a job at the city prosecutor's office, earning the respect of her colleagues with her intelligence, talent, and responsibility. As she advanced in her career, the family's financial situation significantly improved, eventually allowing them to afford a car. This improvement was entirely due to the wife's hard work, frugality, and strong reputation among her superiors. Jorge was a selfish and lazy person who relied on his wife, Luz Maria's income instead of working. He had a bad temper, was abusive, and controlled every aspect of Luz Maria's life. He wouldn't let her have friends, go out with colleagues, or even leave the house without him. He constantly checked her phone and social media, and even forbade her from using them. Jorge's behavior was extremely abusive, and he never stood up for Luz Maria when his relatives humiliated or physically abused her. He also used physical violence against her, treating her like his property. Despite this, Luz Maria repeatedly tried to leave him, but he would beg for forgiveness, and she would give him another chance. On December 15, 2020, after a violent fight, Luz Maria left Jorge and went to her mother's house with their 3-year-old daughter Alice. However, Jorge showed up, promising to change and claiming he had found a new job. Luz Maria believed him again and returned to their apartment. In mid-January 2021, Luz Maria called her mother, complaining about Jorge's broken promises and theft, which had left them in a desperate situation. However, Luz Maria stopped responding to calls and messages, which was unusual behavior for her. Her mother grew concerned and went to her workplace, only to find out that Luz Maria was missing. The police were informed, and a nationwide search effort began, with Jorge as the prime suspect. He denied any involvement, claiming he was also searching for his wife. However, the investigation revealed that Jorge was the last person to see Luz Maria alive, and he was the only suspect in her disappearance. Jorge was outraged and frustrated to be the prime suspect in his wife's disappearance, particularly since his own alibi was inconsistent and unclear. He struggled to explain why he hadn't reported her missing to the police on the day she vanished. If he thought she was at her mother's house, why didn't he call or visit her while the police were searching the area and looking for witnesses? On January 22nd, municipal workers made a gruesome discovery while responding to a call about a clogged storm drain. They found a large plastic bag containing a charred human body. Forensic experts confirmed that the body was that of a young woman. Her parents and brother identified the body as Luz Maria Lopez, despite its severe disfigurement. The body was discovered near the prosecutor's office where Luz Maria worked. Although the area lacked surveillance cameras and lighting, pathologists were able to determine that she had suffered severe beating and died from asphyxia. The evidence included internal hemorrhages, fractures sustained while she was alive, and caked blood particles in her nose and mouth. The investigation revealed that Luz Maria's husband, Jorge, was the prime suspect. A disturbing audio recording, sent anonymously by a neighbor, captured a brutal argument between the couple. The recording revealed Luz Maria's desperate screams and cries for help, as well as faint sobs in the background. Unfortunately, the neighbor who made the recording did not call the police or check on the source of the screams. Luz Maria's mother believes that if the neighbor had acted immediately, her daughter might still be alive. The recording was included in the case files, and Luz Maria's mother gave a powerful interview urging citizens to report incidents of domestic violence to the police rather than simply recording or filming them. Thousands of people protested across the country, demanding justice for Luz Maria. Although Jorge was arrested, he maintained his innocence, claiming he drove his wife to work on the day she vanished. However, security footage showed their car heading towards her workplace, but the tinted windows made it impossible to determine how many people were inside. At the couple's rented home, investigators found washed-out blood traces and drag marks, indicating that the brutal crime likely occurred there. This suspicion was strengthened by the discovery of microscopic fragments of burnt flesh in the trunk of the family car. A recent purchase by the couple, a double orthopedic mattress, caught the investigators' attention. Specifically, it was the dense polyethylene wrapping around the mattress that was significant. Comparative analysis revealed that Jorge had used this wrapping to conceal his wife's burnt remains. Several neighbors reported hearing Jorge threaten and insult his wife just days before her sudden disappearance. They recalled him shouting that he would kill her if she left him, and that he would hide her body where no one could find it. Based on the evidence collected by expert criminologists and witness testimonies, the investigation has reconstructed the horrific events of the crime. On the night of January 19, 2021, Jorge committed the murder, just one day after he and his wife had a violent argument. Jorge had a history of uncontrolled outbursts of anger, but this time he completely lost control. He brutally beat his wife, causing her to scream for help. The neighbors heard her cries but failed to call the police. During the beating, Jorge broke his wife's nose and inflicted a severe head injury. Afterwards, he strangled her with his bare hands and attempted to dispose of the body. To do so, he dragged her into the backyard, poured campfire liquid on her, and set her on fire. However, the intense smoke and smell of burning flesh and hair caught him off guard. The most disturbing aspect of the crime is that Jorge committed these atrocities in front of their 3.5-year-old daughter. Although she may not have fully understood what was happening, she witnessed the beating and murder, which was evident from her cries and screams that were recorded. Jorge, who had a basic understanding of forensic science from his wife's textbooks at home, attempted to cover up the crime and create an alibi. He deliberately chose a dark and secluded area without surveillance cameras to dispose of his wife Maria's body in a drainage sewer, escaping detection. The following morning, Jorge drove to Maria's workplace via their usual route, pretending to have dropped her off as he normally did every morning. Then, he began fabricating a search for his wife, contacting her co-workers, friends, and family. During the trial, Jorge's lawyers employed stall tactics to delay proceedings and discredit the investigation. They argued that all evidence and witness testimony was indirect and that there was no concrete proof to conclusively establish Jorge's guilt. Defense attorneys requested that Jorge's detention be changed to house arrest, citing his deep depression over being accused of killing the woman he loved and the mother of his child. However, crucial evidence came from Maria's phone, which had been in Jorge's possession since the crime. On the first day after the murder, Jorge used Maria's phone to send messages to various people, trying to create the illusion that she was still alive. Analysis of the phone's movements showed it was constantly in the same locations as Jorge's phone. The defense argued that Jorge had found his wife's phone and was driving around the city to search for her. but this claim was weakened by the fact that he had sent messages from her phone and even called it from his own phone. Further evidence of Jorge's guilt included the bruises and scratches on his body, documented by experts in photos, which suggested that the victim had put up a struggle. A notable scratch on his neck was particularly telling. While it was not possible to find Jorge's skin cells under the victim's fingernails due to the fire, the cumulative evidence pointed to his guilt. The prosecutor sought the maximum punishment for the defendant despite several contentious issues in the case. However, the court proceedings were frequently delayed. In October 2022, the defendant was finally convicted of brutally murdering his wife. He received a 50-year prison sentence, still maintaining his innocence. Custody of their young daughter, Alice, was awarded to her maternal grandparents. They expressed that caring for their granddaughter has now become the main purpose of their lives. To our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sumner family. James and Carol Alford, also known as Reggie and Sunar, grew up together in Charleston, South Carolina. They were the same age, attended the same school, and were in the same grade. As they grew older, their childhood friendship blossomed into romance. By the time they were 15, they had started dating and were inseparable. Their friends thought they made a beautiful couple, and James and Carol kept photos of their happy early years in their archives. They dreamed of a long, happy life together and planned to get married as soon as they turned 18. Their parents approved of their relationship and supported their decision. However, their plans were put on hold when James was called up for military service in the Army. They decided to postpone their wedding until his return and exchanged regular letters. But as time passed, James was sent to Vietnam, and contact with him was lost. Carol didn't know if he was alive, as he stopped writing to her. Carol continued her studies and got a job at the Charleston Air Force Base. She married twice, first in the late 1960s, but that marriage ended quickly and she had no children. In 1975, she married Richard Alford, with whom she had a daughter, Rhonda, in 1977. But her second marriage was also troubled, as her husband abused her and their daughter. In the mid-1980s, Carol could no longer tolerate the abuse and filed for divorce, taking her daughter with her. But Richard continued to harass her, trying to ruin her life. In 1987, he attacked her, shooting her several times in front of their 10-year-old daughter. Carol was lucky to survive, thanks to her neighbors who called for help. She underwent multiple surgeries, blood transfusions, and eventually recovered, although she lost sight in one eye and was left disabled. Her health began to deteriorate again in the late 1990s, and after a series of tests, she was diagnosed with liver cancer. In 1987, Carol's life was in danger due to medical complications, and she unknowingly contracted the hepatitis C virus. Over time, the virus damaged her liver, leading to cancer. Fortunately, with proper treatment and therapy, her condition stabilized. However, she had to take daily medications and undergo regular checkups for the rest of her life. The hepatitis C diagnosis, combined with previous severe gunshot wounds, made it impossible for her to work physically demanding jobs. She eventually found work as a call center operator. Meanwhile, James, her high school sweetheart, had a traumatic experience in Vietnam. He was severely wounded and mistakenly reported dead. He survived and returned home, but lost contact with Carol. Years later, James married, but the marriage ended and he was left alone, struggling with chronic health issues. In 2000, Carol received a call at work from a familiar voice, James. She was hesitant to believe it was really him, as she thought he had died in the war. The two cried and reminisced, eventually agreeing to meet in person. After 38 years apart, they reunited and rekindled their romance. Carol and James started seeing each other daily and soon decided to move in together. They got married 5 months later and lived in the Riverland Terrace neighborhood of Charleston, South Carolina. Despite their health issues, they were happy and took care of each other. They lived near the Cole family, who had their own set of troubles, including Stephen, a Vietnam veteran confined to a wheelchair, and his wife Natalie, who often spent time with friends in bars. Tiffany, the daughter of James's ex, was often left to fend for herself from a young age. She would hang out on the streets with no money, not even for small treats. When James and Carol started living together, Tiffany was still in high school. Carol, being kind-hearted, sympathized with the girl who was unwanted by her own mother. For 5 years, Carol looked out for Tiffany like a daughter, inviting her to family meals, buying her clothes, and giving her money for expenses. In 2004, when the Summers decided to sell their Chevrolet Lumino minivan, Tiffany asked to buy it in installments since she had no money and desperately needed a car. The Summers agreed to sell it to her for a very low price, divided into 12 payments over a year. In early 2005, the Summers were forced to move to Florida due to their deteriorating health. Doctors recommended a warmer climate, so they sold their Charleston home and bought a new one in Jacksonville, along with a Lincoln Town car. They were happy in their new home, making plans for their future. Every day, Carol would call her adult daughter Rhonda, sharing her thoughts and plans. But one day in June 2005, Carol didn't call, and Rhonda couldn't reach her. Rhonda was worried but hoped everything was okay. The next day, there was still no answer. Rhonda called her mother's and James's cell phones every half hour, but they were unavailable and the answering machine remained unanswered. On the third day, Rhonda drove to Florida to check on her mother and stepfather. When she arrived, she noticed the car was missing, the front door was open, and the house was in disarray. There was a table set for dinner, but the food was 3 days old. It looked like the owners had abruptly left in the middle of a meal. Rhonda saw medications, including her mother's cancer pills and James's insulin, on the bedside table. The cell phones were dead. Rhonda realized her mother and stepfather couldn't have left without their medications and phones, so she contacted the police to report the incident. The police put out a wanted list for the Summers car, blocked their bank cards, and began searching for them. The first few days yielded no results, but on June 12th, a man called a bank, claiming to be James Schur, complaining that his card was blocked. This led the police to investigate further. The bank employee became suspicious when checking the card information and offered Mr. Schur to visit the nearest branch to resolve the issue, but he hung up. Shortly after, a woman called from the same number, claiming to be Mrs. Carol Schur, and reported a similar problem with her blocked card. When asked to visit the bank in person, she refused, citing health issues, and asked to regain access to her savings, which was denied. The bank immediately handed over the call recordings and information to the police. When played to Rhonda, the couple's daughter, she confirmed that the voices did not belong to her parents, who were in their 60s, while the callers sounded much younger. The police suspected that the imposters were involved in the couple's disappearance, either holding them captive or killing them after obtaining bank account information. A few days later, the couple's abandoned car was found on a deserted road with no signs of struggle or blood inside. However, hair and sweat marks from both spouses were found in the trunk, suggesting they were taken away in their own car. Further investigation revealed that money had been withdrawn from their accounts after their disappearance, and ATM footage showed a young man making the withdrawals. The police traced the calls made from the imposter's number and found that the SIM card was purchased shortly before the couple's disappearance. A call was made to a car rental company where a Mazda RX-8 was rented under the name Tiffany Cole. The same car was used to withdraw money from the couple's accounts. Using the car's built-in tracking device, the police located the Mazda RX-8 at a hotel in Charleston. A team was sent to apprehend the suspects, who were found celebrating in their hotel room, surrounded by packages and receipts from lavish purchases. The three suspects, Tiffany Cole, Michael J. Jackson, and Alan Lindell Wade, were taken into custody and questioned separately. Initially, they feigned ignorance or remained silent, But after several hours of interrogation and presentation of evidence, Tiffany confessed to robbing the elderly couple and using their stolen money to fund their lifestyle. Tiffany and her new boyfriend stayed overnight at the Summers house, where they were treated to dinner and hospitality. During the meal, Carol Summers mentioned that they had almost $100,000 in savings, which sparked an idea in Tiffany's mind. That night, Tiffany and her boyfriend began making plans to get their hands on the money. They enlisted the help of two accomplices, Bruce and Alan, and started putting their plan into action. On June 6th, Tiffany rented a car while Bruce and Alan stole 4 shovels. Together, they drove to a deserted spot in the woods and began digging a grave for the Summers. On July 8th, Tiffany bought rope and duct tape, which she gave to Bruce and Alan. That evening, they approached the Summers house, pretending to need help and asking to use their phone. Carol, feeling sorry for them, let them in. Once inside, Bruce and Alan attacked the Summers, binding their hands and feet with duct tape and blindfolding them. They questioned the couple about their money and valuables, threatening them with torture and death. The Summers gave in, hoping to spare their lives. As soon as the attackers got the information they needed, 2 more accomplices arrived, helping to drag the Summers out to their car. They drove the car to the woods, with Tiffany and her boyfriend following behind in a second car. In the trunk, James managed to free his arm and remove the duct tape from his and his wife's faces. But it was too late. The car stopped, and the Summers were led to the grave, where they were pushed to their deaths. The elderly couple pleaded for their lives, but the young criminals showed no mercy, brutally killing them by burying them alive. According to Bruce, the perpetrators covered the bound couple with earth for about an hour, during which time the victims cried, confessed their love for each other, and said goodbye. The autopsy later revealed that the couple died of suffocation, with pieces of soil found in their mouths, respiratory tracts, and stomachs. After committing the heinous crime, the criminals abandoned the Lincoln in the woods and returned to town in a rented car. They broke into the Summer house, stealing valuable items, and then returned to South Carolina to spend their loot. However, their celebration was short-lived, as the stolen cards were blocked after 2 days, and all 4 perpetrators were arrested 4 days later. The trial and conviction followed. Bruce Nixon, who had fully admitted his guilt and cooperated with the investigation, was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Tiffany Cole, who claimed she was not directly involved in the murder, was given the death penalty, along with Jackson and Lindell, who had chosen to remain silent. The evidence against them, including Tiffany's involvement in the criminal plan, renting a car, and participating in the grave digging, was overwhelming. The 4 criminals appealed their sentences multiple times, but they were all denied. Although Jackson, Tiffany, and Lindell were sentenced to death, the penalty was never carried out, even 18 years after their atrocious crime. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Danilo Cavalcante. Danilo Cavalcante was born on July 3, 1989, in Esto, a municipality in the state of Maranhão, Brazil. Unlike many children, he wasn't pampered or comforted with bedtime stories. He didn't have the luxury of being escorted to school at a young age. Instead, he grew up on the streets, a common experience for children in poor Brazilian neighborhoods. The environment in Brazil's favelas was marked by extreme poverty, low living standards, and high unemployment rates. These challenging conditions created a breeding ground for street crime to flourish. When you're exposed to poverty, lack of basic necessities, and violence from a young age, your instincts for self-preservation kick in. People survive by any means necessary. Unfortunately, many individuals who grow up surrounded by violence often resort to similar behavior because it's all they know. The Brando family easily adapted to their new life, enjoying their cozy home and improved lifestyle. Deborah and her sister Sarah were extremely close, not only working together at their cleaning service, but also frequently talking on the phone throughout the day. They had achieved the peaceful and happy life they had moved to another country for. However, a chance encounter would soon alter the course of their lives forever. While spending a day off with her children at the park in 2020, Deborah met Danilo Cavalcante, a 31-year-old fellow countryman. A strong bond quickly formed between them. Danilo was very attentive to Deborah and kind to her children, which made her fall in love with him. She believed she had found a trustworthy and suitable partner. After a few months of dating, they rented a small house and started living together as a family. Initially, everything seemed perfect, but over time, Danilo's hot-tempered and emotional personality began to surface. As his relationship with Deborah deepened, he became increasingly jealous and possessive. Baseless mistrust gradually turned into complete control in their relationship. Scandals erupted repeatedly, leading to violent outbursts. Every night, Dino would get drunk and return home as a completely different, angry person. He demanded total submission from Deborah, punishing her severely in front of the children if she resisted. Despite his abuse, Deborah refused to back down and fought to protect her children. Fed up with the mistreatment, Deborah fled to her sister's home and eventually sought help from the police in the court, obtaining a restraining order to keep Cavalcante away. However, Cavalcante continued to stalk her, threatening violence if she tried to end the relationship permanently. Terrified for her life, Deborah began to investigate Danilo Cavalcante's true identity. By reaching out to acquaintances in Brazil through social media, she uncovered information about his past life and reasons for entering the United States. The truth about her lover's deception left Deborah in shock. On November 5, 2017, Danilo Cavalcante shot and fatally wounded his 20-year-old friend, Walter Jr. Moreira dos Rios in Figueroa, Brazil, over a dispute about a car repair debt. Cavalcante fled the country before authorities could arrest him due to a delay in registering the arrest warrant in the National Warrant Registry. 7 months later, in June 2018, a warrant was issued for his arrest. Cavalcante entered Puerto Rico illegally and obtained a fake ID, eventually settling in Chester County, Pennsylvania, where his sister lived. After Danilo's true identity was revealed, Deborah demanded that he leave her alone, threatening to expose his secret if he refused. However, this ultimatum proved to be a fatal mistake. On the evening of April 18, 2021, Deborah was walking with her children in front of her house, chatting quietly with an elderly neighbor while her kids played nearby. Danilo approached her, and the neighbor, who remained waiting, watched as they conversed calmly. But without warning, Danilo pulled out 2 knives and launched a brutal attack on Deborah. As she fell to the ground, he stabbed her repeatedly. Her terrified children screamed for him to stop, but Danilo was consumed by his own agony. He inflicted a total of 38 stab wounds on Deborah. A horrified neighbor attempted to stem the bleeding and provide emergency aid. Meanwhile, Deborah's daughter rushed to the neighbor's house to call for help and summon emergency services. Deborah Brendo was rushed to P.O. Hospital, but sadly succumbed to her injuries. Meanwhile, Danilo Cavalcante fled Pennsylvania to evade arrest, remaining at large for several hours until he was eventually apprehended by Virginia State Police. Danilo Cavalcante was extradited to Pennsylvania and arrested in Chester County on August 16, 2023, pending trial for first-degree murder. The investigation revealed that Cavalcante had refused to accept the end of his relationship with Deborah and had subjected her to domestic violence and intimidation since 2020. During the trial, Deborah's child, who was present during the traumatic event, gave emotional testimony, recalling the horrific details of that day. The jury quickly reached a guilty verdict, sentencing Cavalcante to life in prison without parole. After the verdict, Cavalcante was taken to the Chester County Jail in Pocopson, where he awaited transfer to a federal prison. However, on August 31, 2023, at around 9 a.m., he escaped from the jail by climbing up a chimney, using the narrow space between 2 walls in the exercise yard to bypass the barbed wire fences and evade surveillance cameras. Danilo Cavalcante escaped by walking up the roof, running across it, climbing over the fence, and pushing through the barbed wire. This was a surprise, as prison officials thought they had fixed all the weaknesses in the prison system after a previous escape by Igor Bull. They had even added more barbed wire after another inmate, Igor Bolta, escaped a few months earlier. The authorities quickly launched a massive search for Danilo Cavalcante, with alerts going out everywhere. The Pennsylvania State Police Chief gave regular updates to the public through press conferences, asking residents to be vigilant and help track down the escaped prisoner. This strategy worked, and within hours, Danilo Cavalcante was spotted walking along a road about 2 miles west of the prison. On September 2nd, with the help of local residents, authorities used surveillance cameras to spot Cavalcante in the early morning hours. They quickly set up a search perimeter around the area, securing roads and railroads to prevent his escape, and offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to his capture. The initial search focused on a 2-mile radius around the jail in Pocopson Township and Chester County, which is heavily wooded. Just days after the escape, a local resident spotted Cavalcante in a creek bed, but he managed to flee into the woods before police arrived. The search continued, and the perimeter expanded after a week. A security camera then captured Cavalcante on film at Longwood Gardens, a popular botanical garden nearly 3 miles from the jail and just south of the initial search area. The search team has been bolstered with more personnel and advanced equipment to locate Cavalcante. As part of their efforts, helicopters flew over the search area, broadcasting a recorded plea from Cavalcante's Portuguese-speaking mother, urging him to surrender peacefully. The next morning, a security camera detected Cavalcante on a property approximately 2 miles south of the prison. In response, police established a new perimeter around the facility, Longwood Gardens, and nearby schools, which were closed during the search. As the search entered its 6th day, tension mounted in the community. With a convicted murderer on the loose, locals were anxious for answers about Cavalcante's prison escape. In response, police advised Philadelphia residents in Chester County to take precautions, including locking doors and windows, securing vehicles, and staying indoors. Pennsylvania prisoner Danilo Cavalcante, 34, escaped and sparked a massive manhunt. On September 9th, a crucial breakthrough came when Cavalcante was spotted on a video intercom call at a former colleague's home near Phoenix, about 20 miles outside the original search perimeter. Cavalcante, who was skilled at altering his appearance, had shaved and changed into new clothes, allowing him to evade detection as he traveled across the state. He stole a van from a dairy store and drove it to Phoenixville, seeking help and shelter from acquaintances. The abandoned van was found the next morning, September 10th, in a field in suburban East with an empty gas tank. As the search continued, the focus shifted to northern Chester County, and authorities updated the search perimeter. On September 11th, Cavalcante was added to the Interpol list, and the reward for information on his whereabouts was increased. That night, a local resident called emergency services to report a burglary at his garage, describing a suspect matching Cavalcante's description. The homeowner defended themselves by shooting the intruder, Cavalcante, 7 times. Despite being injured, Cavalcante managed to flee the scene and steal a .22 caliber rifle with a scope and flashlight from the home. When police arrived, they found Cavalcante's sweatshirt and shoes near the house. After identifying the perpetrator and learning the time he was now armed, police warned residents in the South Coventry neighborhood to secure their properties by locking doors, windows, and vehicles, and to stay indoors if possible for their safety. A breakthrough came around 1 a.m. on September 13th when an aircraft equipped with thermal imaging technology detected Cavalcante in the woods. However, due to poor weather conditions, police had to wait until sunrise to approach the location. Just after midnight, a security alarm went off within the search perimeter, leading authorities to the suspect's location. According to officials, the thermal imaging technology played a crucial role in tracking down Cavalcante, ultimately leading to his capture. On September 13th, around 8 a.m., the police found Danilo Cavalcante, a dangerous criminal, asleep with a stolen rifle. He attempted to flee by crawling into dense undergrowth, but a police dog named Yoda caught him by biting his head and holding him until the police arrived. According to Lieutenant Colonel George Biven, Yoda inflicted minor head injuries on Cavalcante during the capture. Biven explained that the police were able to approach quietly, which gave them the element of surprise, allowing them to capture Cavalcante without anyone getting hurt. Immediately after his capture, Cavalcante was questioned and revealed that he had survived on watermelons and creek water, traveled only at night, and even had a close call with a police officer while hiding. He had planned to steal a car and escape to Canada. Since being returned to prison, Cavalcante has been charged with multiple crimes related to his escape, including burglary, trespassing, and theft. Following Cavalcante's capture, local and state officials, including Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, expressed their gratitude to the numerous law enforcement officers who contributed to the search. Following Cavalcante's escape, the police set up a perimeter several miles in each direction. The Chester County Jail Board, responsible for overseeing the Chester County Jail, faced intense criticism from local residents for failing to prevent Cavalcante's escape. Residents argued that the jail had the opportunity to implement necessary security upgrades after Igor Boll's escape attempt on May 19th, and that these upgrades could have potentially prevented Cavalcante's escape, as he used the same method as Bolta. The prison has taken action against the guard who was on duty during Cavalcante's escape on September 7th, citing that the guard had a clear chance to stop Cavalcante during the escape. Following the recapture of the offender, the Chester County Jail has implemented new security measures, including the installation of a tin roof over the area where Cavalcante climbed up 2 walls to reach the roof and escape. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro emphasized that Chester County officials need to provide answers regarding the escape, considering the prison's past history. He praised the collective effort of law enforcement agencies and local residents who worked together to apprehend and bring to justice Danilo, the offender who will now face punishment and remain behind bars. Friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Karina Vetrano. On August 2nd, 2016, Karina planned to meet her father after work to spend some quality time together. Since Miss Vetrano had moved away, family gatherings had become infrequent due to everyone's busy schedules. Karina in particular had a lot on her plate, juggling 2 jobs. Philip picked up Karina from work and took her to his home, where they shared stories about their week. Before leaving, Karina invited her father to join her for a jog, as they often did, covering several miles together. However, Philip declined, citing severe back pain that couldn't be alleviated. He offered to call her a cab instead, but Karina preferred to jog, enjoying the pleasant weather and fresh air. Moreover, she was training for an upcoming marathon to take her mind off her recent breakup. A jog was just what she needed to clear her head. That evening, the Vetrano family said goodbye to their youngest daughter, Karina, as she left for a jog at 5:45 p.m. Her usual route took her to Spring Creek Park, a peaceful oasis in the midst of the city. However, her father, Mr. Vetrano, warned her to stick to familiar paths and avoid talking to strangers, as parts of the park were overgrown with thickets and swamps. Ignoring her father's advice, Karina wandered into a secluded, grassy area in search of solitude. Tragically, her decision proved fatal. A sudden, sharp pain struck the back of her head, and she fell to the ground. As the hours ticked by, the Vetrano family grew increasingly anxious. It had been 2 hours since Karina left, and she should have been home by now, or at least answering her parents' frantic calls. But there was only silence, and a chilling uncertainty settled over the Vetrano household. Philip's anxiety grew as he sensed something was wrong, so he sought help from his neighbor, the the chief of the New York City Police Department. The two were on good terms, and the chief knew Philip wouldn't worry unnecessarily. After reporting Karina missing, the police launched a search in the park area and surrounding streets, using experienced canine units. The first 24 hours are critical in missing person cases, so they utilized all available resources before nightfall. Meanwhile, Mr. Vetrano, accompanied by a group of volunteers, searched for his daughter on his own. He thoroughly combed the park, making phone calls along the way. As dusk fell, he spotted a light in the grass and upon closer inspection, found Karina's phone. Philip hoped that maybe she had simply lost her phone and hadn't notified them. Philip, her father, pushed through underbrush towards police officers but stumbled upon a lifeless young woman, partially undressed and face down. As he turned her over, his heart sank. It was his daughter Karina. A scream erupted from his lips as the truth hit him. His darkest fears realized. The news was too much for Mr. Vetrano to bear. The police, responding to his anguished screams and cries, rushed over to restrain him, carefully pulling him away from Karina's lifeless body. They explained that the area was now a crime scene, and every detail, no matter how small, was crucial evidence. To preserve the integrity of the investigation, the officers gently but firmly asked Philip not to touch or disturb anything in the surrounding area. On his way home, Mr. Vetrano was consumed by thoughts of how to break the devastating news to his wife about their daughter's passing. Memories of the past flooded his mind, including the day their second daughter was born on July 12, 1986, in Queens. He felt immense pride in her from a young age, recalling how obedient and well-mannered she was. He vividly recalled taking her to her first day of school and her academic achievements, which led to her earning a master's degree in speech pathology from St. John's University. Karina had always dreamed of helping children, particularly those with autism. She was a multi-talented individual who loved to travel, write, and engage in sports, especially running, which was a shared passion between them, bringing them closer together. As a father, he had been protective of her relationships, wanting her to be truly loved and hoping she would build a strong family like his own, eventually giving him loving grandchildren. As Mr. Vetrano returned home, the journey felt like an eternity. He paused at the entrance, taking a deep breath to calm himself. "I need to be strong for my family," he thought. "I have to pull myself together." His wife met him at the door and immediately understood the gravity of the situation from the look on his face. Kathy cried and embraced her husband, offering comfort. As the news spread, relatives and friends struggled to come to terms with what had happened. They were shocked and disbelieving, finding it hard to accept the brutal and sudden death of her. The investigation revealed that Miss Vetrano had been the victim of a brutal attack. It was clear that she had fought back. Her clenched fists and the bruises and abrasions on her body were evidence of her resistance. Her athletic clothing was torn, and the autopsy showed that the back of her skull had been damaged by a blunt object, likely a stone. However, the cause of death was ultimately asphyxiation, with a clear mark visible on her neck. The forensic examination provided disturbing evidence that Karina Vetrano's death was a violent and intimate crime. The experts' findings supported the police's initial suspicions. Traces of earth and grass were found under the victim's fingernails, suggesting that she tried to free herself from her attacker's grip. Further examination revealed that her teeth were knocked out and cracked, indicating that she bit her attacker in self-defense. The multiple scratches on her neck indicated that she used her hands to try to pry the attacker's grip loose. Karina's determination to survive is evident in her fierce struggle. In life, Karina was a creative and thoughtful person who enjoyed writing. She had starred in a short film based on her poem Paradox in 2013 and often wrote about complex topics such as love and mortality in her blog posts. Tragically, shortly after her death, another jogger's body was found in a similar location in Princeton, Massachusetts. A woman walking alone in a secluded area suffered a similar attack. At first, it seemed like the same perpetrator as in previous cases, But geneticists compared DNA samples from the crime scenes and found no connection between the crimes. Surprisingly, the DNA samples didn't match, indicating they came from different individuals. Of particular interest was the DNA found under the victim's fingernails, on her back, and on Katrina Vetrano's phone. Although the DNA was present in small amounts, experts were able to analyze it, and for a long time, it remained the only lead in the investigation, offering hope of identifying the attacker. Due to the fact that most murders are committed by someone the victim knows, the police had to consider every possibility. To aid in the investigation, the victim's father, who was the first to find his daughter's body, provided a DNA sample. Unfortunately, this procedure was conducted on the day of Karina's funeral, which was a poorly chosen time. Later, all of Karina's relatives also underwent DNA testing, but none of the results matched anything. Detectives questioned Karina's family and friends to see if anyone had a grudge against Mrs. Vetrano, but they found no one who might want to harm her. Everyone they spoke to respected and loved her. Next, they considered the possibility that the crime was committed for selfish reasons, such as meeting Karina in a secluded spot and attacking her. Unable to make progress, the investigators turned to the public for help, offering a $10,000 reward for information that could identify the perpetrator. The public responded, and detectives pursued over 250 leads, conducted 600 DNA tests, and compiled more than 1,700 reports. However, all their efforts were in vain, and it seemed that the perpetrator might not have a prior criminal record, which made the investigation even more challenging. Then on August 31, 2016, a utility worker came forward with information, saying he had been in a restricted area of the park when Karina died, and had seen a man emerging from the bushes, who then ran north. The New York Police Department created and distributed a sketch of the suspect based on a witness's testimony. However, by December 2016, they began to consider the possibility that the person in the sketch might have been an innocent bystander who was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. Unfortunately, the release of the sketch did not generate any new leads, and the investigation stalled once again. On December 4, 2016, the FBI joined the investigation into Karina Vetrano's death. They created a psychological profile of the perpetrator, suggesting that the individual was very familiar with the area, particularly the park where the incident occurred. This led them to believe that the attacker might have lived or still lives nearby. However, the FBI thought that the perpetrator was now avoiding the area, fearing capture. The police realized that the perpetrator had chosen the quiet, overgrown area of the park to commit the crime because it was easy to conceal his actions. Following this theory, the police screened local African-American men, but this did not produce the desired result. Chanel Lewis, a young African-American man who lived in a low-income housing complex in Brooklyn, about 4 or 5 miles from Spring Creek Park, did not stand out as a suspect at the time. Chanel lived with his mother, 3 sisters, and their children. He had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, but this didn't hold him back from graduating from a special school for students with emotional and behavioral issues. In school, Chanel was a quiet loner who was often bullied by his classmates. They would tease him about his clothes and appearance, and some girls even intimidated and punched him. Although he would sometimes try to fight back, he was no match for his tormentors. Instead, he would often smirk and walk away, earning him the nickname African Lizard. Despite this, a classmate named Danielle remembered Chanel as a smart kid with good grades who liked to share funny videos on the bus. She never saw him be mean to anyone. There were some reports that Chanel had once talked about wanting to bring a knife to school when he was in middle school. However, the head of his school later transferred, Dr. Edward Dana, said that they had no record of such threats. During Chanel's time at his school, he never got in trouble and never made any threats towards his fellow students. Chanel Lewis had a tough time as a teenager, often facing bullying and experiencing trauma. Despite this, he dreamed of working in social services to help people in need. When conflicts arose at home, he would take long walks, frequently visiting a local park. Lewis had a few minor run-ins with the police, including 2 incidents in Spring Creek and another for public urination in May 2016. In another incident, a store owner accused Lewis of loitering in his shop with a crowbar. When the police responded, they checked Lewis's ID and let him go, since he didn't have a prior record. Although this incident seemed minor at the time, it would later become crucial in the investigation into Katrina Vetrano's death, which occurred in February 2017. Detective John Russo remembered a crucial detail from the investigation: a suspicious young man in a hoodie who would often lurk in the park, walking slowly and stopping in front of houses as if scouting for potential burglary targets. Although Russo lost sight of him, he didn't forget the encounter. The next day, a store owner reported an incident, and a teenager matching the description came to the police's attention. 2 months into the investigation, Russo revisited the memory of the suspicious individual, wondering if he might have witnessed something crucial, leading investigators to focus on Chanel Lewis. As they dug deeper into Lewis's background, his peculiar behavior, and a disturbing claim that he had expressed a desire to harm girls raised serious concerns and suspicions. With no other leads, the police decided to concentrate their efforts on Lewis. After Karina's death, it was discovered that Chanel Lewis had left his family's home after an argument and went to the park. When he returned, he was disheveled and had torn clothes, bruises, and abrasions. His mother asked what had happened, and Chanel claimed he was attacked. A witness's description of a man fleeing the park matched his account, which fit with the timeline of events. When investigators reviewed the medical records, they found Chanel's story plausible. However, they noticed similarities between Chanel's events and Katrina Vetrano's case, raising suspicions. On February 4, 2017, Chanel voluntarily provided his DNA at the police station, which seemed unusual for someone who might be guilty. The interrogation of Lewis began the next day. He acknowledged being in the park on August 2, 2016, around 5 p.m., but specified that he was walking on dirt paths and listening to music. He admitted encountering Katrina jogging with her phone. When detectives asked if something happened during their encounter, Lewis nodded and softly replied, yes. The response was cryptic, suggesting confusion. The investigators grew frustrated as Lewis struggled to provide a clear explanation. Finally, he stated, I was angry, and things escalated. What happened, happened. The detectives remained skeptical, concerned that this vague admission might create doubt among jurors in a potential trial. They pressed Lewis for more information, and he eventually confessed to the crime. Chanel recalled that during the attack, his punches knocked out several of Karina's teeth and injured his own hand. The struggle lasted around 5 minutes, during which time Katrina fiercely resisted, scratching and biting to avoid drawing attention. Lewis dragged her off the path and into the tall grass, where he attempted to undress and assault her. Despite being shocked, Katrina continued to resist. Eventually, Chanel strangled her until she was no longer alive. When questioned about his relationship with the victim, Chanel claimed he had not known Katrina before the attack and that it was a chance encounter. The motive behind the attack was unexpected and bizarre. Chanel's hatred and uncontrollable aggression were triggered by a neighborhood gang member playing loud music for hours on end. These negative emotions were then unleashed on Katrina. Although the reason behind the attack was strange, investigators' confusion was resolved when DNA comparison results matched perfectly. The microscopic traces found on the victim's body and phone belonged to Chanel, leading the police and prosecutor to conclude that the case was solved and ready for court. Chanel Lewis's motive for killing Katrina Vetrano seemed unlikely. However, it's possible that he had seen her before at the park with her father and had become interested in her. When she rejected him, he might have become angry and attacked her, leading to a tragic series of events. At the trial, which began on November 5, 2018, Lewis pleaded not guilty despite his earlier confessions to the authorities. His family also denied his involvement in the crime. The prosecution charged Lewis with murder and sexual assault, which carried a sentence of 25 years to life imprisonment. The debate about Lewis's guilt went beyond the courtroom, with the media also discussing the case. Lewis's defense team argued that his arrest was unlawful and that there was racial bias and discrimination. However, the judge dismissed these allegations, stating that the investigation was conducted legally. The prosecution presented DNA evidence that linked Lewis to the crime scene. The defense argued that the evidence was contaminated due to the large number of people present at the scene, including the victim's father. Nevertheless, a forensic biologist stated that the odds of the DNA belonging to someone else were incredibly low, 1 in 6 trillion. The prosecution also presented Lewis's phone records, which showed that he had searched for terms related to forgiveness and second chances in Catholicism. This raised the question, what was Lewis trying to atone for? The release of Lewis's confession video sparked further controversy, with the defense arguing that the confession was coerced and that the police had fabricated evidence. The defense suggested that the initial investigation was botched and that Lewis was made a scapegoat due to public pressure for an arrest. The jury was impressed by the defense's arguments, but ultimately they were unable to reach a verdict, leading to a mistrial on November 21, 2018. A retrial was scheduled for March 2019, and after 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Lewis guilty of Katrina Vetrano's murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole on July 23, 2019. Despite the defense's attempts to delay the trial, the jury found Lewis guilty. The case highlights the deep-seated prejudices and fears in society. Katrina Vetrano's death serves as a grim reminder for women to be cautious. In the end, justice may have been served, but both families lost their children. The hope is that the truth was uncovered and that an innocent man is not behind bars while the real perpetrator remains free.